Okay, I'm going to call back to order the regular session. We're going to report out on the closed session first. So we did give direction to staff to prepare a resolution to declare a fiscal emergency for the purposes of labor agreements. So that's our report out from closed session. Moving on to our regular session, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Amara.
Present.
Holmes.
Present.
Sarah Sammons.
Present.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Here. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilwoman Amara, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the mayor's accommodations, proclamations, and acknowledgements. Before I move on to the proclamation, I wanted to just do a moment of silence. We've lost three very important members of our community since our last city council meeting. Jackie Weston was our CEO of our Chamber of Commerce. Colonel Bud Anderson was a triple ace World War II fighter pilot who was a very important member of our community. And then also Aldo Panesci was very important member of the Placer community as a whole. So I just wanted to have a moment of silence for all three of those people that we lost. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So moving on to the mayor's proclamation. I'm just going to go ahead and read this one from up here at the dais. This proclamation is for Pride Month for June 2024. Whereas Pride Month began in June 1969 on the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising in New York City after LGBTQ persons and their allies rose up against discriminatory laws which have since been declared unconstitutional. And whereas Auburn denounces prejudice and unfair discrimination based on age, race, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, and is a city in which all persons should feel valued, safe, welcomed, and respected by their peers in the community. Whereas all are welcomed in Auburn to live, work, and play, and every family in all of its various forms deserves a place to call home where they are safe, happy, and supported by friends and neighbors. Whereas Auburn appreciates the value and dignity of each person, recognizes the importance of equality and freedom, and acknowledges the positive contributions made by members of the LGBTQ community to actively promote principles of equality and acceptance. Now, therefore, I, Rachel L. Harris, Mayor of Auburn, do hereby proclaim June 2024 as Pride Month. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the adoption of the agenda. This is a time set aside for council by members and/or the public to ask for the removal, postponement, or change to the listing of the sequence of an agenda item. The agenda will be approved by a consensus of the council. Is there any changes that need to be made to the agenda? That's the council. Anyone in the audience? Oh, Councilmember Holmes. Oh, we're not to consent yet. This is just the agenda. Okay. So seeing,
I move we approve the agenda.
okay,
I'll second.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Moving on to the consent calendar. The consent, all matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion or separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. Are there any requests from council to remove any items? Okay, Councilman Holmes. Item 7, you said? Item 7. Okay. Any other items that need to be removed? Okay. Any member of the audience wish to remove any items from the consent calendar? Okay. Seeing none. Is there any public comment on any of the items in consent other than item 7? Okay. Seeing none. No. Oh, this is for the items on the consent calendar? Oh, nope, that will be public comment. Wait 1 second. Okay, so there's no public comment on the items on the consent calendar. Then I'm going to move to approve the consent calendar agenda as amended.
I'll second it.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Holmes,
Aye.
Sarah Sammons. Aye. Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye, thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 7 of the consent calendar. The professional service agreement with Mark Thomas and Company. Mr. Holmes? Councilman Holmes?
Yes, I just had some questions about the storm drain system in Auburn. And this item deals with some professional services for services related to storm drains. And I just want to raise the question, is that the major storm drains that we have in Auburn, how long have they been in existence, I guess, is
Menjo for the history of storm drains?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mengeldine, Public Works Director. Councilmember Holmes, I wish I really had the answer for you. I don't necessarily know the exact timeline in which the storm drains in Auburn have been in place. I can tell you some of them are quite old. And we are working to rehabilitate the ones that we know have issues. And that is primarily why item number 7, the amendment to Mark Thomas's service agreement, is on the agenda this evening.
Isn't it true that some of them are under buildings and in really hard places to access because they're so old and our city's so old?
We do have challenged storm drains within the city of Auburn.
We had one buried and we located it when the roundabout construction started.
Not everything's where you think it is sometimes in the ground. Are
is
there any
correct.
other questions on item number 7? Councilman Holmes, are you done with your questions?
yeah, I didn't get an answer, but yes,
I
I'm
think
done
the
with.
answer was.
I can
we don't
certainly-
know.
I can certainly get back to you with timeframes for when some of the storm drains went in. I don't know that offhand. I do apologize.
All right, thank you.
It's also possible some of them are so old that no one documented them at the time, which is challenging as well. All right, thank you very much. Is there a motion?
Well, I'll move that we amendment number 3 to the professional services agreement with Mark Thomas and Company, Inc. for on-call storm drain design services.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Amara,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Sarah Sammons. Aye. And Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Okay, that concludes our consent calendar. Moving on with public comment. Thank you, Menjo. This is the time provided so that the public may speak to the council on any items not on the agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible, not to exceed 3 minutes. The council cannot act on items not included in the agenda. Items may be referred to staff or placed on future agendas. So feel free.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for giving us this time to speak with you, and thank you so much for being public servants for the people, for having taken your oath to uphold and defend our constitutions, both state and the federal. We are coming to you this evening in peace as we the people to give you notice and instruction so that you and your agents may provide due care. This notice of election maladministration has been given to the California Governor, the California Secretary of State, the California Supreme Court, and to the California Senate and Assembly. We are now giving you a copy. In the past 4 years, we have witnessed the form of elections change from one-day elections to election season without the consent of the people. However, we have learned that the government was never granted any authority to change the ways of elections, not even in emergency. Despite adamant claims that there were no instances of election malfeasance, that the election process is to be trusted as certified, we have discovered there are multiple cases of election maladministration, including in the city of Lodi, California, where a council member was convicted of election fraud. We have included an exhibit of these proven incidents in the notice package just given to you. We've also included a list of election best practices. Please take notice that the people have assembled together, consulted peacefully by right, and realized that our servants in every state, as well as the federal government, have been led to believe that they are generating the basic rules in terms of elections. However, the people now know that the foundational law and the Constitution are the rules which must be followed with exact due regard. Please take notice that the California Constitution, Article 4, Section 2B, grants power to the government to hold our elections on a single day. Furthermore, the California Constitution prohibits improper practices and disqualifies all votes from underage, non-residents, non-citizens, mentally incompetent, and felons incarcerated or on parole. Any deviation from the Constitution results in nullification of the election. Maximum 46D states where the law prescribes a form, the non-observant of it is fatal to the proceeding. My colleague will continue.
Hi. The main object of government is the protection and preservation of personal rights, private property, and public liberties. The government just serves for our benefit as public officers, trustees, and servants of the people. Since this board has a history of certifying elections that have not followed the exact form specified in the Constitution, we are very concerned about another maladministered election will occur in our fair county. Please take notice that in our Republican form of government, all servants have sworn to protect our rights as constitutional elections as a condition to be hired as trustees. As an elected official, do you believe it is your duty to always uphold the form of lawful elections as written in the Constitution? Or do you believe that you have been granted authority to conduct elections, count votes, and certify election results that deviate from the Constitution? If so, please show constitutional authority granting you the power to change the form of the people's elections within 15 days. Sworn under penalty or perjury by affidavits, and post this granted authority conspicuously notifying the public and all agents. Or do you agree by acquiescence all statements in this notice to be true and fact? If you cannot show where you got the authority and you take any action to certify future elections which do not follow the constitutions, your actions will be construed as being done with malice, intent, full knowledge, and purposeful transgression against your trust indenture, your contract with the people, that would be the Constitution. This notice is given in peace and the love of Christ, and your agents may provide due care for those who have all political power, the people. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't think I got both of your names. Could you just say? your-
Certainly, I'm Diane Green. I'm from Colfax.
Thank you.
Deborah Grinder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Catherine McBride, a resident of North Auburn, and I'm speaking on behalf of Lee Fryer, who couldn't make it tonight. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. In light of your pending decision to recognize the so-called Pride Month, I'd like to offer the following statement. I believe sexual desires that deviate persistently from heterosexuality confuse a spiritual condition in a person from their essence and biology. In contrast to my belief, the Pride movement presumes sexuality is a sure and absolute basis for identity and individuality. Following that philosophical assumption, today we have dutiful orientations multiplying under the Pride banner and adults in authority creating conditions in children that destine them to bodily deformations and lasting confusions. This is very sad. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name's Jackie Silverman. I am one of the property owners up in Aeolia Heights, and I'm just here on behalf of my neighborhood. They're a group over here.
Is this about did we do that on the consent calendar?
No, that's one of the items
That's-
tonight.
That's one of the items
Late-
tonight.
yeah.
Forgive
So
me for
You're on
the.
the agenda later, so you would do your public comment on
Oh,
the agenda.
wonderful. Then forgive
If
me,
that's,
everyone.
if you want to talk about something else,
No,
then,
just that.
okay, perfect. Yeah, so just a little bit longer. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. This is a short note. Congratulations and thank you and the Auburn Arts Commission for the FAM Festival to be able to held at School Park Preserve yesterday. Went off good, and congratulations to Ryan Goodpasser and April Maynard for working so hard to make it happen and for the evening concert. So I also wanted to note that I have support from a number of the service clubs that we can create some discussion and a pathway to put some improvements to rehabilitate the park area and to make it a better spot. It needs a lot of improvements, which you've already noted, but we have the support of many of the service clubs that would like to lend a help to design a program that we could use to help volunteer to help make the park a better spot for use.
Great. Maybe you could reach out to staff and you could talk a little bit more about how that could.
I can send a note and we
Great.
can start some dialogue.
Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And CC me, Eric. CC me on your email, please.
Just a question. Is this the time to ask questions regarding 14 and 15 about the sewage?
Nope, we're not quite there yet.
Okay, so you'll let us know?
Yep, we're still on public comment.
Okay, good. I
So
wasn't. sure.
14's next.
Good evening, board. I just want to address a few things. First, it wasn't that long ago that, with the Auburn Union School District, the board I sit on, they did a presentation here and it wasn't really too good a report that we got from you guys. And I just want to, mention that it was the prior boards that put us in this position to make swift, fast decisions to keep this board to go out to not go into receivership. And so I was really disappointed with this board not recognizing, that point. And now we see.
You're disappointed with the city council?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
We,
Is this going to be a dialogue?
no, I just wanted to clarify because you
Okay.
said board.
Okay.
We're not a. board.
Okay, the city council. Thank you for that clarification. And so you guys find yourself in almost the same situation coming up. And I encourage you, this isn't to, threaten you or anything. I encourage you is now's the time to take swift actions, to pass the buck down the road and try to come up with alternate solutions. You guys need to cut budgets. Budgets need to be cut. And I would like to say I have the confidence that you guys will find those areas that could be cut. And the next thing I want to address is that, this is a reminder to myself as well, that as the elected officials, we are not elected to take part in social or political movements. And with this Pride Month, this was a social and political movement that you guys took part in. And I would like to make my own statement on that. And so I've been attacked. I've been called a racist. I've been called a bigot. I've been attacked for the love that I have, my religion, the love that I have for Jesus Christ. And recently, I've been slandered as being a part of anti-government groups. So, so I really hope you guys don't support any of that. And I would like to leave, and I like to, with a proclamation myself of We the People, is that any form of witchcraft, any forms of idolatry, any forms of child sacrifice will not be tolerated, and your days are numbered. Thank you.
Okay. Something we've done in the past to make public comment move a little faster is there's the applause sign and sign language is this, so that way we're not having to do applause after everyone. So if you are in support of what someone is saying, feel free to do this, and then we can kind of keep things moving along. So thank you.
Mayor and council members, my name is Connie Brocker, and I'm from Auburn. And as a believer in Jesus Christ, I am called to stand for righteousness, truth, and morality. And I am really concerned about the whole proclamation for the Pride Month. As I look at Pride LGBTQ plus agenda, it is a degradation of humanity. It boasts arrogance, selfish ambition, and it promotes a sexually deviant and violent lifestyle that crosses all boundaries. It is destructive to families, exploits and mutilates children under the guise of being born the wrong gender. And it is perverse in practice. Pride LGBTQ projects a facade of a loving community, but it is far from the truth in reality. There are many who have transitioned from their born gender to the opposite sex, only to face suicidal thoughts after the fact as they realize the mutilation of their bodies prevents them from living a normal life. I think specifically of Chloe Cole, and she is only one of many who are detransitioning, and their bodies are so mutilated they can never, like she talks about being having mastectomies on both sides, and she'll never be able to nurse children. And she is not a boy, she is a girl, and that was what she was born. Looking back at ancient civilizations such as Sodom and Gomorrah, which was annihilated for sexual sin, it's not a road that I want to see our community go down, and the consequences are extremely grievous. Saturday, I had gone to the Capitol for a Let Us Worship event, and while we were waiting for it to start, a young man who was at a Pride event 2 blocks down the street. He was dressed only in boxers and socks. And he came down and he was ready to do a strip tease until he was ushered away. And then we had to walk through a whole group of Pride because we took the light rail. And it was alarming. The clothing, the action, the dress, the various things that they were doing. I didn't sleep well that night. I was very bothered by this. I know the council is searching for ways to raise revenue in order to cover the huge deficit that you've incurred, that you have not incurred, but you've inherited. However, I suggest that there's better ways to raise funds than getting federal funds. In that respect, why not ask the community at large for ideas, bake sales, sponsor a bike ride
I'm sorry, Connie, that's 3
for
minutes.
city? Thank you very much.
For your comments.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Pat Pastoni, and I'm here to speak up a little bit about the proclamation tonight also. I always feel like, when you really are using kindness, which you hear a lot of today, that you show the actions of kindness, right? So anyway, I just think that it's sad that we, in the proclamation, we're opening a door, if you will, to down the road. Things don't happen just like really quick. They happen over a period of time. And when you open the door to something like this, it could totally change our whole city, and not for good. I'm a retired teacher. I love subbing in our schools, local schools here. And I'm so concerned with it. And it's not that, I dislike the people, and but it's what they're standing for, and what they're putting on the young children. You see, as a teacher, I have a heart for the young ones, and they're just growing up. They're young. They're not adults like all of us. And they're being fed stuff like this, okay? This is just one example of an LGBT book, okay? It feels good to be yourself. Beautiful illustrator, I might say, but I want to read you just a couple pages. And this is what's being taught to our little ones. You see, when you were born, you couldn't tell people who you were or how you felt. They looked at you and made a guess. Maybe they got it right. Maybe they got it wrong. What a baby's body looks like when they're born, it could be a clue to what the baby's gender will be, but not always. Again, this is so confusing. And these are the kind of books that we're allowing, because they pilot these books and we get them free and we get them and then teachers use them. It's confusing to children. Let them grow up and be children, and the pride, as I see, is just, like I said, it's opening a door to more of this kind of stuff. And, we're fighting this in our school boards. We're not fighting the people. It's not the people. We care about the people. We don't, I like all people. But again, I don't like it when they're doing this to the children who are not adults yet to make a decision if they want to have that kind of lifestyle. Adults should be able to make that, and, I should be okay if they decide to go that way. But when it's pushed in my face and my grandchildren and the students that I have, I get really, really upset. So I would just urge that you would really, in your proclamation, whatever that's going to be, and if you're going to fly the flag or whatever you're going to do, that you'll just think about it a little bit more. Think of the children. Okay, think of the children. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and board members. I'm Mrs. R.D. Malali. I think there's been some amazing comments tonight. My first comment would be, I have grown to know and admire and respect Jason Wedge. I've gotten to know him over the years. He's not only a friend, he's a brother in Christ. He is one of the men of highest integrity that I've ever met. He works cooperatively with all walks of people, all walks of life. I've seen that. I've never heard a foul word, a foul gesture towards anyone as far as being unkind or ugly towards anyone. So the slander that's happening, you need to be aware that I don't know what that person's agenda is. I can guess what the agenda might be, but that would only be a guess. But I have come to know him and his wife, and they're most respectful family and members of this community. And along with Greg Holt, I got to hear him and hear his bio. What an intelligent, compassionate, both of these men, intelligent, compassionate men who are serving sacrificially for our children in this community. So I hope that this is resolved without further litigation and such, but it will be handled and in a public apology or something of that way for his reputation. God knows who he is, and he knows who he is, and we know who he is. And whatever lies are being spread, they are lies. Second agenda, the pride flag. First of all, what I've been taught, it's not a flag, it's a banner. And to fly it with the American flag is not okay. And whatever they've done in the White House, et cetera, I too respect all peoples. I don't respect all agendas. So I know there's been some really pleasant things here said tonight, but what I want to say along with that is with a tone that this LGBTXYZ or the letters that I don't know that will continue on and can continue to be added onto is an abomination, absolute abomination. There is an agenda. And so when pandemic started, and we know we could call it COVID, we could call it pandemic. I didn't misspeak. It's a pandemic. So 1619, CRT, LGBT, and the community schools, which is on the next one, the community schools. That is socialism and communism on the rise. And so we are very aware when that curtain got pulled back and those parents at home got to see what was taught in the schools and some of the curriculum of porn and the perversion and the lies of the 1619 Project, the CRT, which is just escalating racism. And 1619 is teaching our kids to hate America. We've seen it. And we understand what's happening. We understand the agendas behind it. So please, we are asking as a community, we are a conservative community. We respect all people in your language. Please consider it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any other public comment?
Yes,
Yes. Councilman Holmes?
yes, thank you. I would like to suggest, this is something that can be solved relatively easy. One, that we get the clock in this room to show the correct time. And
Off by about an hour.
and secondly, in the recent past, we've had discussions about solar, the city adopting solar and photovoltaic issues. And I'd like to have an update on that at our next council meeting.
Yeah, I think that an update on the energy audit, because I think the solar is included in that. I think that would be great. Okay. All right. Is there any other public comment? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, Councilwoman Sarah Sammons.
Yes. I'm not going to respond because that's of the other comments that have come up, simply because that's not part of our
Yeah, you can't.
issue. All I can say is what I'm feeling, and based on my experience in working with students and advocating for all families, poor families, kids of color. I actually have the experience of working with these kids. And if you say you love them and that you love people, recognize that love is love. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Then we're going to move on to our public hearing. Our public hearing, the council, when considering the matter scheduled for the hearing, will take the following actions. So we are going to first open the public hearing. So we're opening the public hearing, and then we're going to hear from a presentation from staff.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor, Emmanuel Dean, Public Works Director. I want to first was saying this is the 2024 sewer assessment to be placed on the Placer County tax roll. This is simply a formality. That's something that we do on an annual basis. The sewer tax roll is sent over to the county. They collect it on our behalf, and then we bring the monies in-house and use it according to the plans that the city council has set in place. For fiscal year 24-25, the sewer usage charge is the same as the previous years. The previous assessed years, the server charge is based on a rate analysis accepted by City Council on April 21st, 2014. The rate analysis at that time identified what the annual sewer charge should be for the next 5 years, and it ended in 2018, 2019. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we never did a sewer rate update, and we continued to use the old rate, and so there was no increase to the rate users. With that being said, this evening you will hear a sewer rate analysis for the future rate that is planned, but just know that for the 24-25 fiscal year, the rate remains at $78.63, and there is no change to the rate payers. With that, I will leave it open.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see, is there any, is it public comment?
I had just a really quick question, Menjel. I read there are 37 tax exempt accounts. What is a tax exempt account?
I'll have to look into that.
Sorry, I just.
No, but I do believe that there are some churches and things like that that have a different rate based off of what was originally proposed in 2014. I'll come back to you with
Like,
additional information.
yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
I wrote that down and I forgot to ask you offline. So, whenever you can get that.
Gary may have the answer.
Gary might have the answer.
Yeah, just so two notes. So there are some properties that are not on the tax roll for a variety of reasons. So I think those are the ones that
City, like
bills are
our
sent
city,
to.
city building.
Directly, exactly.
Okay.
So, because this is the process for putting it on the tax roll for the county to collect through that process, but for those properties that are not on the tax roll,
Okay.
they need to be sent bills
Veterans
directly.
Hall,
And
things
so
like
the
that.
city.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you so much. I just was wondering what they were. There are 37 of them, so I wondered what they were.
Thank you, Gary.
Yes, of course. And I do have one note on the documents that are included here for item 14. There is a public hearing notice for the sewer rate increase, which is included in one of the attachments to the resolution that actually belongs in item 16. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's two different Prop 218 issues that we'll talk about. But that one should be moved to 16, but everything else is correct.
But for 2024, there's no
rate
for
increase.
25, there's no change. So
That is
thank you
correct.
very much.
Correct.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay.
I believe there was a young lady.
Oh, do we want to do public comments? Yeah, come on up.
Absolutely. Figure it out.
Yeah, I just, there's a group of us who write about this and just want a little more clarification.
Sure.
Thank you. We understood that. Thank you for your help. Yeah, so if this is, am I right in thinking that it's assessed every 5 years, generally?
Generally, but we're behind. Yeah.
Okay, so the new rate, I believe, is 82.55 at beginning 2025.
That would be item 15. That is not this item.
So this is
Okay,
the item
that's
for
not the
this
same.
coming year where we're going to keep everything the same.
Right?
There's another item for the rate increase. and
I
that-
see, and that happens later
Yeah.
in this meeting.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
item
And the
16.
sewage line project, that also happens later in this meeting?
Yes.
Can you do me a favor and just go like this to me?
Yeah, as soon as we finish this
We'll
one,
get-
we're gonna
we'll-
be, that's the very next one.
We'll
Yeah,
point to you.
I know. Sorry, we'll let you know.
It's confusing.
Is there any other?
There's a lot on there about sewer.
Hi, my name is Emily Monkle. So I've had a lot of sewage problems over the 6 years of owning my home. And every time there's a sewage problem, I call because I'm like, insurance won't cover it. City will help me. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So I just wanted to come here and suggest some suggestions. With the sewer pipes that I had, they're called Orangeburg pipes, which are cardboard wrapped in tar. And to my knowledge from Public Works, the many gentlemen that I've met over my 6 years, it's really common in Auburn. So I just wanted to suggest, I don't even know what to call it, but like maybe we can work, because when you buy a home, that's not something you are aware of unless you look in your pipes with a camera. And when you share a common line with your multiple neighbors, you don't know whose problem is what. So when you're at the bottom of it, i.e. me, it becomes all your problem. And so I just wanted to kind of like throw it out there, suggest, not that anybody cares about my suggestion, but maybe have like a problem solving of frequently asked questions, a place you can go, because I spent thousands of dollars trying to find out whose problem it was, how could I be how could we work together? And at the end of the day, it just cost me thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. So if you have a problem, you have to bring a solution. So my solution would be to maybe have like a deal or something with Home Depot or Ace or the city. That would maybe have like a camera that you can see if it is a collapsed pipe, if it is, because when you fix it, you don't know if it's a collapsed pipe, if it's a broken pipe, if there's a hole in the pipe. And so I just kind of want to throw it out there for anybody else watching that might also have a problem.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for all your sewer problems. I've heard that from a couple of people.
I will just say, as someone who actually lives in the city limits but is on a septic tank because we don't have city sewer, I've had, my home is old and I've had multiple problems and when I've had people come out, they always have stuck a camera down to see what it was as part of the problem, trying to figure out what it was, but it's crazy how quick that adds up. So.
Cameras can only go so far too, though, I think.
That's frustrating. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
We can take that feedback back and see if there's anything that we can do to help our residents. I'm not a sewer expert, but I'm sure that our folks can look into it a little bit further.
Yeah.
So if I can make just a brief comment based off of some of the things I heard. So Orangeburg is the type of cardboard pipe that the young lady was speaking about. That's generally not used by the city's infrastructure. Orangeburg was utilized by a lot of private laterals. And unfortunately, because they are collapsed, we can't get our cameras into them. I'm saddened to hear that during your home inspection, your inspector didn't catch this because sewer inspection is one of the requirements for a home inspection when you're purchasing a home. So I feel like you received the short end of the stick, and we have certainly done everything and will continue to do so for our residents to ensure that we're giving you all the best information where we possibly can. So with that, I'll leave it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none. All right. I think we're going to close the public hearing. And then is there any council comments or questions before we take action?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, please do.
I'll make a motion by resolution that we authorize the levying of sewer service charges for fiscal year 24-25 to be placed on the county placer tax roll as proposed.
I'll second that.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
Aye.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 15, declaring the intent to approve a sewer line project and the assessment to fund the project, approving the supporting engineering report and setting a public hearing for proposed assessment.
This is, she should, our young,
No, is this
No,
one or the?
I was just going to
16?
say, our previous public speaker should listen to this.
Oh, there we go.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor. Angela Deem, your Public Works Director. So tonight, staff is bringing before you this item because we would like to see the council declare an intent to approve the sewer line project and assessment to fund the project along the Aeolia Drive. Just to be a bit of background. The line proposed for replacement is a private line installed many decades ago and has begun to fail in some locations due to its outdated materials, i.e. Orangeburg of that sort. The sewer line is in poor condition and must be upgraded to meet city standards. Currently, the line is a private line owned by the residents that are connected to that line. Once it meets city standards, it can be incorporated into the city system. If the approved property owners, an assessment will be financed and to replace the existing pipe with a new pipe that meets city standard. Once the sewer line meets the standards, the city can then incorporate it into our system, and we will continue to cover any future maintenance and replacement costs. I'd like to also add that as part of this process, we've been working on this for several years. With our city attorney and city management, we were guided to enter into a contract with Bartles and Wells, who is an engineering firm that specializes in this type of work, to help us determine what they should look like, what it should cost, and what actions and steps needs to be taken. In the council received the attached engineering report. The engineering report for this item is supported by Proposition 218 assessment ballot. The engineer report provides in compliance with Articles 13C and 13D of the California Constitution, otherwise known as Prop 218, which states, I'm sorry, there's a lot of information on this one. We've been working on it for a while, but.
This has been a long time coming.
I apologize for it. My head is not necessarily in the greatest place this evening. Any general tax imposed or extended or increased without a voter approval by any local government on or after January 1st, 1995, or prior to the effective date of this article shall continue to be imposed only if approved by a majority vote, which in this case would be the 11 residents that is currently connected to this failing sewer line. Gary, anything? Yeah.
Yeah. Happy to add something. So in this case, it's a benefit assessment. So it's not a tax, and this is not an election, but you will hold a Prop 218 hearing. The resolution before you tonight sets it for August 12th,
Okay.
which is more than 45 days from today, and that's the minimum notice requirement that needs to be provided to the property owners. So if you adopt the resolution tonight, that will direct staff to issue the notice of the public hearing and the ballots to the property owners. Those will go out. And then we will come back on August 12th. At that time, we'll hold a public hearing. Anyone will be able to submit their ballot up to the close of the public hearing. Once it's closed, you'll then count them. As long as there's majority support for that, you'll then be able to adopt the assessment. In the engineer's report that's before you tonight, it's a 20-year payback, and this is a loan from your sewer fund to fund this. And then the assessments would pay back the sewer fund. And then this would be a city-owned and maintained sewer line that would go in. So it's an assessment ballot proceeding under Prop 218, a little different than an election, and also slightly different than the sewer rates that we're going to talk about in a moment, but it's the same basic concept. You'll hold the hearing here in City Hall at your meeting on August 12th.
Okay.
And I'd like to add, and I apologize. I'm just all over the
No
place
worries.
this evening. I've got so many things going on privately that, yeah. But with that said, I've had the opportunity to meet with all of the homeowners in this location, and for the most part, I'd say most of the homeowners are in support of this. There are some standouts because they had some concerns and some questions about how it was going to be assessed on the tax roll. I think we've answered some of those questions. I'll state that we sent out the ballot a little early and we gauged interest on it. So we've received 8 positive ballots for this measure to move forward, and we've received 2 in opposition of it. So there is, for the most part of the 11 properties, overwhelming support.
So just as a clarification, just to make sure that we're all clear on what this is not the individual lines that go to the house. This is a main line or a ladder. I'm trying to just do an overview for everyone. This is because we're not going to be taking over individual lines to people's homes, right? Because we don't do that for other people.
No.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, let me clarify this.
Yeah.
We would be replacing the main line in the roadway. However, as part of this process, we would be connecting those lines to the current homes.
Okay.
So moving forward.
But we wouldn't take ownership of
No.
those lines.
Moving forward, just as we do with every other portion of the city, we would be responsible for the main. The property owners would be responsible for their connections, even though it would be done as part of this process.
Okay.
And that's why they're paying. They're paying for their private connections.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear too on the ballots and the initial ballots that went out. Ballots will be resent.
Yes.
After tonight's
Yeah,
hearing.
it was just a
assuming-
pre, that was
yeah.
just a kind of a.
Yeah, assuming that you all approve this resolution tonight, ballots will be sent again following this. And those ballots will be kept sealed here at City Hall and could be hand delivered even on August 12th. And then those will only be opened after you close the public hearing on August 12th.
Yeah, and that's just to the 11 property owners.
Right.
Mhm.
That is
Yeah.
correct.
So this project is us trying to help those 11 property owners that have that large expense to be able to spread that expense out over.
Absolutely. So there's a certain element of compliance that is concerning, and that's why the city staff wants to see this move forward. We're talking about a failing line that's running over a large portion of property in Aeolia. And should it fail completely, and we would be looking at environmental spills that would be far more costly than what's being proposed there. So we think that this is a benefit to the residents as well as the city.
And just to be clear, there's no interest, so it's an interest-free loan, basically over 20 years payback.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's a loan from our sewer. And if I might, Menjel, and Menjel knows, I've been involved with this issue. I've had the constituents talk to me about this for the past couple of years and going round and round trying to come up with a solution that would be fair and equitable for all and to assist those homeowners. I truly feel that this is the best way to move forward with this. Some of those property owners, now they will also be on, they'll be connected to the city sewer and paying their annual rate. Some of those property owners, they didn't know they were not paying for their sewer. Like when they purchased the house, So it happens with really old developments like this. So we're going to get them online. They're going to start paying into the system. We're going to be able to repair that. They're going to pay for that cost as, versus having to go out and get personal loans. And because there is a public health and safety threat that we are having on public land. So I think really that this is a fair and equitable way to go, and I'm very supportive of it. And I really appreciate Menjol and staff working very diligently with all those property owners. Again, I was involved and really appreciate it.
Are there any other questions from council before we move to public comments? 1 second. We're going to do public comment in just 1 second. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, public comment. If you'd like to come up to we have to have people use the microphone. So that way we record this for later.
And this is just for those,
Okay.
this is the item that's only affecting the property owners in Aeolia Heights.
This is not the rate increase.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Oh,
Thank you. We didn't understand what was going on here based on what you had on the agenda. And I'm totally in support of what you're doing and one of the public works. And I think the way he said it, he made me also in support.
great. Thank you.
Thank you
No,
so much.
I
We
think
appreciate
didn't
that.
understand the agenda item.
Hello, I'm back. I'm Jackie Silverman. I'm one of the property owners at Aeolia Heights, and I basically echo everything that you just said. I think I'm speaking for for the 8 property owners who have voted in the affirmative in the thank you. We're very, very, very grateful for the opportunity that the city has presented to us. Some of us have lived in this community for a very long time, have been dealing with this for years. Now that we know the extent of the potential environmental hazard that exists, we are very eager to get this fixed. And I can't stress it enough how grateful we are for the deal that the city has approached us with. So I think you will hear from others tonight who feel the same. We're eager to vote, and there are some outliers in our community who feel differently, but there are 8 properties that I know of who are I can say it again, very grateful. So yes, thank you so much, and I'll let others speak.
Good evening. My name's Harry Hickman. We live at 105 Darlington in maybe the first house up there, 1885. I want to first of all say that we really appreciate your declaring an intent and look forward to saying thank you when you get a vote. Okay, as to the Orangeburg, we replaced all of our Orangeburg on, it turns out, Jackie's house and our house 2.5 years ago. So our lateral from the houses to the street are up to date and new. And what we're looking for is we're looking for the solution that San Francisco used when they had trouble with their sewage in the bay. They had sewage in the bay they couldn't get rid of. So they built a pipe, a really big pipe, and they built it as short as possible to keep it cheap, but as long as necessary to get the sewage out into the ocean where there isn't a way. Because right now our sewage is not going away. It's in our backyard, side yards, and our streets. Next item, I want to thank you and your predecessors for your hiring practices. I came to teach at Placer High in 1986, and I'm hard pressed to think of a city employee who wasn't kind and agreeable and competent. We've run recently into the city manager a little bit. He's very good. This fellow sitting behind me is just terrific. We think of countries having citizens, towns, if they're big, might have a neighborhood. We're a small enough town to have neighbors. Walking down the street last week, I looked up, he looked up, we saw each other, and I have face blindness, so it took me a minute. Bam. He knew who I was, came over, we talked. Be very proud of this person and do what you can to keep him. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jasmine, there.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Jill Phillips, and I am here because I was confused about the sewer projects that are going on in and around Auburn. So this is not the Placer County Highway 49 wastewater capacity project. So it would have been nice to have some clarification on the agenda. This was specifically for areola and applied only to 11 and
Property
We will
owners.
try to
property
make it a little more
owners.
clearer in the future.
Yeah, so I was a bit confused, to say the least, and I did all of my homework today trying to figure out what was going on. But anyway, just wanted to let you know that.
You can always give us a call if you're confused too. We can help you sort it out.
Well, I did. I was emailing quite a few different people, but
Okay.
it wasn't until later in the evening I started questioning whether or not I was looking at two different sewer projects. All right.
Sorry about
Thank you.
that. Thank
All right.
you.
Hey, City Council, thank you for what you do. Thank you, Menjel, for all your work. And thank you to our neighbors who worked so hard to get in concert with each other, most of us, to solve the problem. I've lived on Aelia Drive for 30 years. It was a rude surprise about 6 or 7 years ago to find out that, oh, I own this line that's broken and there's raw sewage running along my property. There was been a lot of confusion, but a lot of really good work by a lot of people. And hopefully we'll all come together on this. It'll be a wonderful thing to have it solved, so we won't have to worry about EPA things. And we don't have to step over you know what at the bottom of our driveways. So I appreciate y'all taking it on, and let's hear it for quality of life in Auburn.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for all the work that you do. I am the newest homeowner on Aeolia Drive. I moved in June, and I became a homeowner in September. So this was all, I knew this, what I was buying into. And, but I feel very in support of what the city has proposed for us, and I would like you to know that. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I'm gonna bring it back.
I'll make a motion. By resolution, declare intent to approve the sewer line project and an assessment to fund the project, approving the supporting engineer's report and setting a public hearing on the proposed assessment.
Second.
Oh,
Madam Clerk, you follow the roll?
give that one to Holmes. Councilmember Dowden Calvi.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
Aye.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Adele Harris.
Aye. Okay, that passes. We're moving forward. Thank you all for coming. We won't be offended if you want to go. Okay, moving on to the sewer rate study and analysis.
Good evening again. Menjel Dean, your Public Works Director. Madam Mayor, City Council, on August 28th, 2023, the City Council approved a consultant contract with Mark Hildebrand to facilitate our sewer rate analysis. The sewer rate analysis, as previously mentioned, expired in 2018, 2019, and it was necessary for us to do so. As we look down into the future, there's many linear infrastructure projects that need to be updated. There's sewer lift station projects that need to be updated, and ultimately we have to find a way and a mechanism to fund these projects. Mark Hildebrand, who sits here before you, has been working diligently with Public Works staff, and we are here he's here to present his findings this evening. So with that, Mark, please take it away.
Great. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Great.
We can hear
I'm
you.
going to go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. And is my presentation up?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for having me this evening. My name is Mark Hildebrand, owner of Hildebrand Consulting. I'm a utility rate consultant specializing in water and wastewater rates in California. I've been doing it for over 20 years, and I operate out of Oakland. So I appreciate, I did request to give this presentation remotely just to save some budget for the city, and I appreciate your flexibility in allowing me to do that. So this evening, I will be giving a presentation on the sewer rate study that we've completed, and we have recommendations on how we think the city should move forward. So on my agenda, I will just cover how utility rates are set, just in general, kind of a high level introduction to that, take you into the financial plan findings, discuss the cost of service and rate design behind the rates that are charged to your customers, and then talk about next steps in the project schedule. I am very flexible in terms of this presentation. I really don't mind interruptions. So if at any point I'm not providing enough detail, or if you have any clarification questions, feel free to jump in. So the rate setting process for sewer rates, there's 3 general steps shown here: revenue requirements, cost of service, rate design. So the revenue requirements is basically a financial plan. We look at the entire sewer enterprise, get an understanding of what the expenses are, how much money is being spent every year on operations, what the capital spending is going to look like over the next 10 years. And then we also compare that to what the existing revenues are, and we make a determination of how much we think rate revenue needs to increase over the next 5 to 10 years in order to meet the revenue requirements going forward. Once we understand how much rate revenue the sewer utility needs, then we start looking at how to allocate that to different types of customers depending on how they use the service, and that's the cost of service. So determining the cost of providing service to different customers, and then that's tied to rate design, which is what the rates will look like when the customers receive their bill. In terms of how this process is guided and the requirements behind it, there's really just one, aside from just industry standards and best practices, there's a single law in California called Proposition 218. Typically, it's part of the Constitution, and there's 2 general elements to it. The first is that you just can't charge more than the cost to provide service. So rate consultants like myself are used to make sure that when you charge your customers, that you're not charging too little, because you want to make sure that your utility is meeting its revenue requirements, but you also don't want to charge too much. And so there's a fine balance there, and that's really the heart of the cost of service analysis. The other part of Proposition 218 is the public hearing process. So there is a requirement that you send out a Prop 218 notice to all your property owners so that they know about the proposed rate increases, and they're given an opportunity to protest against the rates if they wish to. And then there's a public hearing where those protests are heard. At the conclusion of today's meeting, we will be asking for council's direction to staff to send out that notice so that a public hearing can be held in the future. So jumping into the financial plan, the first thing we do is we look at where the utility stands, where we're starting from in terms of cash reserves. And when we look at the beginning of the current fiscal year, which started back in July of last year and ending in a couple weeks, the sewer fund had just over $13 million in cash. This number is going to come up again in the future, because this is more than the target reserves for the fund, but you'll see that there are some really large capital projects that are coming. So it's actually really good news that you have this cash on hand, because you're going to need to draw down on it in about 4 or 5 years. There's some really large capital projects coming. In terms of how much we'd like to maintain in reserves going forward over the long term, there's no formal policy for the sewer funds. The city doesn't have a formal policy, although there is guidance stated by the city that the general fund should keep about a 30% balance of estimated expenditures for the following year. So based on that guidance, the study does recommend an operating reserve of 4 months of operating costs. So that's about $1.4 million that should be kept on hand. And that's to manage changes in your operating costs or revenue. And then a capital reserve of $3 million. And the purpose of a capital reserve is because capital spending can fluctuate pretty wildly from one year to the next. 1 year it might be $1 million, and the next year it might be $6 million. Just the nature of projects is very volatile in terms of the spending. And so it's really important to keep a cushion in your capital reserve to be able to adopt to any spikes in capital spending that you might come across. So together, that's about $4.4 million in your reserves that you should keep over the long term. a snapshot of your revenues that you have in the sewer enterprise. It's almost entirely rate revenue. So this is the revenue that you just approved a few minutes ago on the tax roll that customers will be paying. That's, about 99% of the revenue in this enterprise comes from those, that tax assessment, or it's not a tax, it's a sewer rate, but it's on the tax assessment bill. There's some interest earnings that you get off your reserves and a little bit of capacity charges that you get from developers when they join the system. On the other side of the coin, there's your operating and debt expenses. So about half of that is contract services. So the city has a wastewater treatment plant, and there's a private firm that actually operates that plant. And so a big part of the budget is used to pay for those private services, operating services for the treatment plant. Another 19% or so is for debt service for past capital projects. And then the remaining expenses are your salaries and benefits and supplies for basically for managing the collection system. It is important to note that this $4.3 million does not include capital spending, which is a really big part of the annual spending, and we'll talk about that next. So in terms of capital projects that are coming up, this isn't an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to highlight some of the larger projects because some of these might be familiar to those in the audience. There's some pretty large projects, and you can see some really large projects. The first one, the sewer collection system repairs, it shows at $7.6 million. That's over the course of 10 years. So it's about, or 9 years rather, it's about $850,000 per year. But over the next 9 years, it's going to add up to about 7.6. And then in 2031, in 2032, you can see there's 3 large projects, and that's going to be that spike in capital spending that I mentioned that you're going to need those reserves for in order to be able to deliver those projects. And then there's a series of smaller projects that are happening in the interim between now and then. So that's a total of $30 million in larger projects that you will be seeing over the next 9 years. So it's a good amount of capital spending, and there's some additional miscellaneous projects listed down below. Shown graphically, this is what it looks like. So you can see over the last 6 years, the historical average capital spending has been about $3 million. And you can see that volatility I was talking about, some years being over $6 million and other years being less than $500,000. So that's the purpose of that capital reserve, is being able to absorb those spikes, those larger capital spending years, and then in years where it's below average, that's when you build that reserve back up. Going forward over the next 7 years, you can see it's pretty steady. They're planning to spend, somewhere around $3 million a year, but then there's that 2031, 2032. That's that really big spike in capital spending that I've been mentioning several times, and that's where you're going to draw down all those extra reserves that you currently have. It's great that you have those reserves. If you didn't, we'd either be looking at significantly larger rate increases than what is currently being proposed, or we'd have to debt finance it. And neither of those are your first option. You'd rather be in a situation where you have, adequate reserves so that you can continue to implement moderate rate increases and not have to issue debt. So the average annual spending, when you consider that spike in spending, will be $4 million, which is an increase over here, or historical spending. So in this graph, there's a little bit more going on. So let me see if I can get my tool up here. Here's a pointer. So there's 2 graphs here. The first one is the top one is comparing expenses and revenues, and then the middle one here is showing reserves over time. So in this top one, the background in green shows your revenues. And so the light green represents the existing rate revenue that you currently have with your existing rates. The dark green up here represents the additional rate revenue that you'll get with the rate increases that are being proposed. And those rate increases are shown down here in percentages, 5% per year. In the foreground columns, the blue, that's your expenses. So the dark blue is your operating expense. The hash blue is your debt service, and then the light blue on top is your capital spending. And you can see again that spike in capital spending that we've been talking about that's happening in 2031. So the way to read this graph is anytime The green is higher than the blue. That's a surplus year where you're going to be building your reserves. And anytime the blue is higher than the green, that's a deficit year where you're going to be drawing down on your reserves. And you can see that play out over the next 7 years here. You can see reserves really holding steady, you know, it's a little up and down, but really not much activity until you hit 2030. And then all of a sudden you can see we're drawing it down all the way down to the reserve target level, which is that $4.5 million I mentioned. So again, really good news that you have that extra cash in your reserves and you will be using it in 2030, 2031 when the time comes for those projects to be delivered. The rate increases shown here are 5% per year, every year going forward. That's just a little bit higher than historical inflation. You know, to be honest, in my experience, you know, I do dozens of these rate studies every year. And well, from what I've been seeing, 5% is a win. There's a lot of my clients who are looking at double-digit rate increases year after year because they're trying to catch up with their capital spending needs. In the case of the city of Auburn, because you've been responsibly delivering capital over time, you're not you haven't put yourself in a hole where you have to suddenly increase capital spending dramatically. And so you are able to have these pretty moderate rate increases going forward that are just a little bit more than inflation. It is important to note that the last rate increase happened 6 years ago. I wonder if that's contradicting my memory, but it has been a number of years since you've raised rates. At least 2031. Sorry, 2021 was the other number I had in mind. But it has been several years since rates have been increased, and there will be no rate increase this year. You just passed the resolution to send out the sewer assessment roll for this coming year with no change, which means zero rate increase for fiscal 25. So that's yet another year of no rate increases. But so next year, this time, the increase in rates we propose to be 5%, and that'd be 5% for the 4 years after that. You'll want to do another rate increase in 2029, and based on the information we have now, if everything holds true, it'll continue to be 5%. So switching gears to the rate design, this is what your rates look like. Your residential charges, it's a fixed charge that you charge your customers. So in other words, it's based on the size of the account and not based on water usage. It's really not feasible for the city of Auburn to use water usage to try to estimate sewer flow because water is managed by a different agency. And so the access to the water data really isn't feasible to get. And so the city uses other metrics for trying to estimate how much wastewater is produced by different types of accounts. So single family homes are all treated as one EDU or an equivalent dwelling unit. And so they get one charge. Duplexes, townhouses, et cetera, get a allocation of 0.77 EDUs, and then apartments is 0.71. And then non-residential accounts are assigned an EDU based on all kinds of different metrics. It's a long list of different types of accounts. So whether you're a hospital or a restaurant or a car wash, all those different types of accounts have very specific metrics that are assigned to or that are used. And those metrics were developed a number of years ago during a previous rate study. And so we're keeping all of those same rules of the EDU values for allocating those costs. We did update the elevation surcharge. So there are some accounts that require one or more lift stations to get their sewage to the treatment plants, and that is pretty expensive. Lifting water is a expensive endeavor. So some accounts require one lift station, others two, and yet others 3 stations. And so we updated the costs associated with those lift stations and the electricity and whatnot, and updated this EDU value that's assigned to those customers. One more thing to note is that there's an old historical, a number of years ago, there was a special rate for certain customers called the CDBG rate, which was an affordability program that was established quite a few I think over 15 years ago it was established, and it was based on a federal grant that had been received at that time that was promoting affordability for low-income homes. Unfortunately, that grant has run out and that funding is no longer available. So the city has no option other than to discontinue that program. And so the customers who have been getting the CDBG rates will not see that starting in 2025. So here's the current proposed sewer service charge. That's what the SSC stands for, sewer service charge. Currently is $78.62. Starting for fiscal 25, which starts on July 1st, it will still be $78.62, which was just passed, or that bill was just passed. And then you can see the 5% rate increases over the next 4 years. Here's a quick survey of other sewer agencies in the region. You can see that Auburn is really well below average and towards the bottom of the pack. And the proposed increase, well, there's no increase, so that's why they're shown identical for this year. But even with 5% rate increases, you can see that you're not going to leapfrog Placer County anytime soon. So you're going to remain at this placement in terms of your ranking amongst local sewer agencies.
Just really quickly, is that
Yeah.
in the staff report, that particular slide, or is that just in the presentation material?
That's just in the presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Here's some math. I won't go over this in detail, but this just provides some of the numbers that justifies that update to the lift station surcharge. Actually, I'm sorry, the numbers on the previous slide are the existing EDU factors, and these are the updated EDU factors. So it's, I believe it's currently 22, 44, 66, and now it's going to be 24, 48, 72. So they have been updated based on a number of different costs associated with the lift stations. And that concludes my presentation. So the staff request this evening is to receive authorization from City Council to send out the Prop 218 notification and to hold a public hearing on August 12th. So the first rate increase wouldn't happen for over a year from now on July 1st, 2025.
I'd like to add to Mark's report that when we approached this project, one of the things was to ensure that we're keeping the cost to our ratepayers at a minimal. And the second focus was to not overspend or extend ourselves, to identify the projects and build them out into later years and then collect the funds to do those projects, as opposed to depleting our reserves and then coming back and getting the projects. So the idea is to build the reserves, have the monies on hand, do the project instead of having to go into debt services for those sorts of things. So I just want to add that. And with that, we'll open it up for questions to the council.
Thank you. I would just like to say thank you to start out with about doing that planning and thinking that through. We have because we're so small, large projects are hard for us as a city, and we have a habit of not planning ahead for them and having to go into debt or saying we can't afford them and then pushing them out and making them more expensive in the long run. So I appreciate you doing that planning and trying to decrease the impacts on both the rate and on the city and our infrastructure. So thank you for that.
Well, I'll say this was the guidance that we received from the council and the city managers. So you have yourself to thank for it.
We're trying to do more planning, right? Okay, so thank you. Are there any questions from council?
Yes, I do too.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, just a quick comment on what you just said, Menjel. So I think that is a good plan. That's the way I approach things. But of course, if you wait, costs go up too. So I think that's important. That's why we're left to look at this rate increase too. So, and thank you for your presentation.
Councilwoman Dowden-Calvillo?
Yes, thank you very much. Could you just remind me again, when was the last time that we raised rates?
So the last sewer rate analysis was done in 2014, but the last year that we raised rates was 2018, 2019 fiscal year.
Okay, 2018, 2019 was the last time. Okay. I appreciate that. And I just want to make sure we get a copy of the presentation slides in a hard copy, because I think it's online, but some of us are paper. Maybe, whatever you want to call us, but in any event, okay, yeah, because I'd like to just take a look at that, to see what the slight proposed increase. And again, today, the purpose is just to receive this report and then to really pretty much, establish, guidance for the development of the proposed increases to the sewer feet and the, sewer rate, and then have that come back to us for final adoption in August, correct?
Yeah, and I just want to add, there will be two Prop 218 hearings on August 12th. And so the assessment's one, this will be the second one, similar procedures. One of the resolutions, though, that's unique to this Prop 218 process is the procedure for counting and how those ballots come in. Slightly different procedures that I don't think we need to go into detail here, but there will be two different hearings that happen on August 12th, and this will be one of them.
Okay, good.
Let's make sure the titles are really clear so people know which one's
I will
which.
Yeah,
make them very different.
Thank you.
Yes. And
Sometimes they can kind of be similar because it's similar type things.
And I just wanted to say that I appreciate the study. Thank you very much for the information. It is important that we as a city are collecting for the cost of doing services. And I'm all about making sure that the cost is as low as possible, but I also want to make sure that we are able to collect for the cost. And we've had this discussion when we talked about at our last meeting with the planning and building department fees, where the cost to perform a service, in some instances, we were collecting 2% of that cost. And that's just that's not fair for all of our residents and all of our taxpayers. We need to make sure that, you know, especially this is a sewer enterprise fund. So, but everyone that's paying into the sewer enterprise fund, that we're not subsidizing one for another. Everyone needs to pay their fair share. And so I do appreciate that and look forward to the recommendations when they come before us.
And I'd like to add that this was so very different from the other community development fees that we engaged Mark to do this separately and independently of that, because it's a very unique fund and the way we approach it is obviously very different.
We've been very frugal and we've been very responsible with regards to the sewer enterprise funds. And I think that, you know, we already do have a $3 million reserve. And so we're already, you know, because we've been able to maintain that, I think we're able to keep our rates even lower than, and I really want to see those cost comparatives with the other jurisdictions. Again, I know that came up there, but I didn't see them. But, you know, I think that's something to say as well, that we are able to do that. And it's smart to have those funds in reserve so that we don't have to go out and, you know, obtain loans and have to pay interest and cost our taxpayers even more. So I support the proposed reserve amounts as well. So looking forward to discussing this further. Thank you.
Expected things in the sewer world, so having a reserve, I think, is also very responsible for us to make sure that we have that, because since I've been on council, been several times where someone dug in the ground and we found something we didn't expect that cost money. So are there any questions? We'll do.
Yeah.
Are you guys, do you have any questions before we move that?
Yes.
No. Oh, Councilman Holmes.
Yeah. I'd like to know, the report noted that there's some places that have one lift station, others with two lift stations, and another area, I guess, with 3 lift stations. Is there a map of the city that has?
Yes, I can certainly provide that for council, but I'll say for the most part, it's the southern part of the city that's below this current grade that has to pump it up. And for example, I would say below Maidu, yes, Vintage Oaks
yes,
has to
Vintage
pump
Oaks and-
through 3 lift stations to get it here. So it's I can get a map so you can see exactly what it looks like, but it's not very many that has to use all 3. I would say it's a very small community, but there are quite a few that have to use at least 1 or 2 lift stations.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions, council? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comments on the side? Questions? Yep, those count. Yep, anything you want to talk about? Well, about this topic.
So, first question, you said July 1st, 2023, we had a 13.2 million in cash reserves, was that correct? So if that means, and we're actually needing 4.4 million, we've gotten reserves a heck of a lot more than what we've been spending, if that is correct. So, I guess the other question is, the answer to that, I guess, is yes, right?
Yes, we have a large reserve right now.
Large reserve right now, because Right, okay.
Lynn,
And
can you bring the
previously-
microphone down just
Okay.
a little bit?
And previously, am I right in thinking that it was assessed generally every 5 years, except with the exception of the COVID? And then the rate was increased every 5 years, so we're going from that to an increase every year compounded, is that correct?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, I can speak to that question. So the assessment is for a 5-year period. And during that period, you may see a rate increase over every year over that period or 3 of the 5 years. But the last one, there was a 5-year from 2014 to 2018. There was a rate increase of, I want to say approximately 4% every year during that period of time. This particular rate increase, you're seeing no rate increase next year for 1 year, but then you're seeing a 5% increase. That's correct.
Yeah.
We haven't had a rating process.
You just gotta go up to the mic so that we can make sure our Zoom people.
Yes, there was no rate increase
Yeah.
from 20.
I understand
Yes.
that because of COVID. I got that. So we're in a situation where we have considerable reserves, but we're asking for a 5% compounded year-on-year rate increase for money that we will not need until what? So 2031.
Because we're waiting until we have enough money to be able to spend it on this project.
I see. Okay.
And that's
All
not
right.
100% accurate either. So there is a planned linear infrastructure project that's proposed to go out every year for the next 10 years to the tune of about $850,000. It could be slightly more, slightly less, but every year for linear infrastructure, we anticipate that we'll be spending $850,000. There is a lift station upgrades for 4 lift station. Those are approximated to be about $1.3 million per year. So what we're looking at, we have that $13 million, but that's going to start drawing down now. And then we're going to replenish those funds to cover the larger projects that we anticipate having in 2031.
And is there, so I'd like to see a copy of the presentation, which I'm assuming I can download online, right? And then the other thing is there a description of the project that you've got planned? Can we download those
Yes, we
online?
can put those-
Okay, that would help. Thanks.
And again, we're not taking any action on those rates tonight. This is just was information being presented. Absolutely. That's why we have a public hearing, so we can all be prepared, because I need to be prepared too. So thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment? Being, this is just a informational item, I believe, or I know.
Yeah, you're right. Oh,
Thank you.
we do have to adopt a resolution. to set the guidelines.
Oh, do we?
There's actually 2
there's-
resolutions on this.
Yeah.
Oh,
There
yeah,
are?
there's a resolution to
Where?
declare the intent to well,
Where do you?
I don't see
yeah,
them.
so I will move that we, by resolution, declare the intent to hold a public hearing on the proposed wastewater rates August 12th, 2024, and direct staff to provide notice of that hearing, as well as by resolution, set the guidelines for submission and tabulation of protests of rate hearings governed by Article 12D, Section 6 of the California Constitution.
Second.
I'll second it. Oh, you said
Amended. Okay, sorry.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
getting down.
There's been a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
All right.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye, motion carries. And it is now 7:30, so we're gonna take a 7-minute break. So, because it's been 2.5 hours or an hour and a half for many of us and maybe 2.5 hours for some. So we'll be back at 7:37.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
7:37. Not by that clock.
Deborah, can you, Deborah, can you mute you guys? Thank you.
Oh, correct. Okay, we're gonna bring it back to item number 17, the Western Placer Comprehensive Operational Analysis and Short Range Transit Plan Project Update.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor, Mental Dean, Public Works Director. This evening, I'd like to have the city's transit manager / Public Works Project Manager, Natalie Hampton, deliver this project that she's been working with PCTPA and the other local agencies to determine what transit and transportation is going to look like over the next few years within the jurisdictions. With that, Natalie.
Thank you, Menjel. As he stated, my name is Natalie Hampton. I'm the project and transit manager for the city of Auburn. And I'm going to give you a quick project update for the Western Placer County Comprehensive Operational Analysis and Short Range Transit Plan. So a little bit of project background. This effort started in July of 2023, and it focuses on the Western Placer County region. It's comprised of two elements, first being the comprehensive operational analysis, which really takes a deep dive looking at all transit services within Western Placer County. And the second part is the short range transit plan, which is the suggested improvements and changes to the services based on what the comprehensive operational analysis states. There's three main objectives from this effort. The first one being to reevaluate public transit services in Western Placer County, given the changes in ridership and service performance trends post-COVID-19 pandemic. We're just not really seeing the same trends in service needs that we once did pre-COVID, so we want to take a look at that. We also want to coordinate between Auburn Transit, Placer County Transit, and Roseville Transit to develop a new integrated transit service plan throughout the region. Currently, with the three transit agencies, we operate in very close proximity. So we want to make sure that we are doing that in the most efficient ways. And the last objective, the most important one, we want to increase ridership demand and operational performance. Project timeline. So from July to October of 2023, we spent a lot of time collecting data, doing some onboard surveys, as well as community outreach at some community events. I know that I submitted a lot of 22-23 operational ridership data, performance metric data to the consultant. We did a lot of onboard surveys and online surveys asking the public what they want to see out of transit and how it can better serve them. And PCTPA did a great job getting out in the community at a lot of pop-up events. I know I saw them at the Eggplant Festival in Loomis, and they have also been to a couple farmers markets here at the City of Auburn. Between August and October of 2023, the entire system as it sits was evaluated, seeing what it does, what it could do, and what it needs to do. From September to November of 2023, there was a ridership and needs analysis completed. This really looked at where are people coming from, where are they wanting to go, looking at employment hubs, mobility hubs, really kind of seeing the location needs within the region. From November 2023 to spring and April in 2024, some service scenarios and options were then put forward based on all of the evaluating and analysis that was done from last summer to this spring. Last month, there was one last community outreach and refinement period. An online survey was created for the community to really tell the consultant team and PCTPA what they want prioritized in this effort. So where we currently are, the May through July 2024 period, a draft comprehensive operational analysis should be in our hands by the end of the month. Then we will provide some feedback and some comment on that to shore it up. And then a final comprehensive operational analysis will go to the PCTPA board for approval in August of this year. And then the second part of this effort, the short range transit plan, will start to become developed and put into play, and will come back to you, the council, in spring 2025 for adoption. So with a regional effort this large, it's really important to have all relevant stakeholders be at the table when making such big decisions and changes. So there's three main groups that are coordinating through this effort. The first one being the Technical Advisory Committee, or the TAC, and that is comprised of transit operators, PCTPA member agencies, social service organizations, transit riders, and local stakeholders. So far, that group has had 4 meetings, with the next meeting being later this month on the 27th, where hopefully that draft COA is going to be presented. The second group is the Transit Operators Working Group, or the TOG. This group meets once a month and has representatives from the region's 3 public transit operators, so us, Placer County Transit, and Roseville Transit, PCTPA's member jurisdictional agencies, and other Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Service Agency stakeholders. This meeting is really good to kind of bounce ideas off of each other, kind of share experiences, successes, and failures within the region's 3 public transit operators. And then the last group is just the transit providers. So Placer County Transit, Auburn Transit, along with Roseville Transit and their consultant team for their COA, meet occasionally to kind of check in with the progress of the COA and what else we would like to see out of it and what else needs to be done. So there are a couple factors that are currently affecting public transit demand. I think the one that's in the forefront is the rapid population growth, especially in Western Placer County. We have an aging population and other kind of vulnerable populations that are becoming heavily transit dependent. There's also a lot of continued residential and commercial development. With rapid population growth comes rapid development and rezoning. There's a wide variety of development and zoning patterns within Placer County. We have some rural areas, some urban and suburban areas. So just really trying to tackle the best way to serve all of those different zones. And of course, the lasting change in overall public ridership patterns due to the pandemic. So we had 4 methods on how we engaged the community in this effort. We did onboard surveys, online surveys, some pop-up events, and we also held equity focus group meetings. Some major key themes that came from those engagement efforts were primary trip purpose. So it looks like for Placer County transit riders, university or college-related trips made up 22% of their overall ridership, and work-related trips made up 21%. For Auburn Transit, work made up about almost half of total ridership, while recreation and social trips made up a little bit over a quarter of our total ridership. Some top improvement requests that came from the public: they would like to see later and more frequent service, and they would also like to increase frequency for fixed route services. Currently, most fixed route services are on hour headways, and they would like to see some increase in that. And then some challenges for underserved residents that came from the equity focus group meetings were just on-demand service boundaries and transfer requirements. Because we work in such close proximity to Placer County Transit, what that would kind of look like transferring or moving from service to service. Scheduling assistance for seniors, service reliability, and just a good place to go for general information and resources on how to ride transit within the region. So when we're looking at scenario development, the process to that is a 4-step process. First, we developed goals, objectives, and performance benchmarks for each existing network and service. Then we went and applied those performance benchmarks to the existing service to see how it kind of matched up and where the insufficiencies lied. With that, we then recommended some service improvements, and we estimated the cost and then the ridership for each service improvement to each network. And then from there, we developed service scenarios on how to improve and sustain improvement on each service. The proposed goals, objectives, and performance benchmarks for this effort were based on the 22-23 performance data that were provided by Auburn Transit and Placer County Transit. And they account for the lasting pandemic ridership impacts, the differences in the major diversity of urban and suburban rural areas within Western Placer County and their land uses and travel patterns, the roles of fixed route and not on-demand services, as well as measurements at the system level. So we looked at fixed route versus on-demand, or we also looked at individual fixed route and on-demand service zone areas and locations. So this last kind of recent public engagement effort concluded at the end of last month on May 31st, and it consisted of a really comprehensive, detailed online interactive survey that the public had access to. And it asked the public to provide their thoughts on trade-offs and what should be prioritized during service plan development. And so now for next steps, so we're in June, so we are about halfway through getting to the home stretch here for the final COA. So right now at the end of the month, we'll have the 5th Technical Advisory Committee meeting on the 27th, where the draft COA will be presented to us. And then in the months of July leading into August, we'll provide feedback and offer some public comment to that draft, and then shore it up for a final draft that'll go to the PCTPA Board of Supervisors in August. So that concludes my update, and I would be more than willing to answer any questions or comments you guys may have.
Thank you so much for that nice presentation. It was very informative. We really appreciate that.
Great.
Are there any questions about the presentation?
Just a quick
Councilwoman
comment.
Dowden Cavillo.
Yeah, that I found it interesting during the stakeholder coordination in the survey that there are folks that want more frequent stops, because I know that I thought that was probably the least frequented use of our transit system was the fixed stop. So that was very interesting. And I know that we do subsidize the university and college students, that there is that free ride if you are a student. Sierra
Yeah.
College is paying for half of that and for that
Right.
project. So I kind of thought there might be a higher percentage of those folks riding it, but 22%. And so, yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilwoman Martin? Anybody else? Oh, Councilman Holmes?
Yes, how much of our fleet is EV?
So right now, currently, we have 2 Teslas, just normal passenger vehicles, and we have 2 16-seat EV cutaway buses. So right now, 4 of our 7 transit vehicles are electric.
And have we done an analysis on the cost of operating them, EV versus gas?
We haven't done an official analysis, but just looking at spending, I can tell that we save a good chunk of change on gas and maintenance on vehicles. We do have a CNG bus, a diesel bus, and a just unleaded gas cutaway. And just by communication with our city mechanics who do a great job making sure we stay compliant, we have a lot less time and resources and money invested in the EV vehicles that we do have at this time.
And our budget proposes to purchase more of those EV vans for our on-demand. So they're moving closer and closer to all EV,
Well,
Mr. Holmes.
that's why I asked the question.
Fingers crossed.
You're setting it up.
Is that all? Councilman Holmes, are you done with your questions?
Well, are most of the riders now on demand rather than fixed route?
Correct. Yeah. So we have probably, I would say just off the top of my head, probably an 80-20 split on the demand for our door-to-door microtransit rideshare service, which is Auburn On Demand,
Yeah.
versus the Auburn Loop option. Our service hours for On Demand run longer than our Loop does. And it also just gives residents in the community the ability to go to more places.
And are we still operating down to the confluence?
We currently are not. Based on the low ridership numbers that we saw last summer and the summer before that, we decided that the demand for that service just was not sustainable for the amount of resources that we put into it. So we have decided to discontinue at this time.
However, I think that it is true to say that we have on-demand, so somebody could still take an on-demand down to the confluence, right?
Currently, they cannot. We
Oh,
can
they
also
cannot.
bring back that option.
Okay.
But
That would
currently,
be
right now, we
on-demand.
don't.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
If I can add to that.
How come they can go way up 49 out of county, but they can't go down to the confluence?
So I can speak to that. So part of the decision to eliminate the confluence route for this fiscal year has to do with the Highway 49 roundabout project. there were so many stops and starts and blocking of it just made it very difficult to time. And with transit ridership, timing and aligning was one of the priorities, right? So oftentimes it would take an hour or more to get down to the confluence and back. And we would have passengers within the city limits that were waiting to maneuver around here that was waiting longer than they should have been. So it was an operational decision that had to be made.
I understand that. But at some point, I do want to have a discussion with you about having a bus dedicated to go down and back. And it doesn't have to be even a vehicle to start.
So certainly that is something that when we make the long-term decision to either add to that service or eliminate that service, council is going to be part of that decision-making process. We don't make those decisions.
And what are the hours again for our on-demand?
6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday.
No, and Sunday, there's no service?
No bus service at all.
And is part of our situation because we don't have enough drivers? Is that part of it? Or just the extended hours based solely on ridership?
So the previous short-range transit plan, one of the things that came up was that Sunday service needed to exist. But when you looked at the operational cost of doing so, it was adding 30% to our overall operational cost, and the demand was to serve about 5 passengers. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Sierra Sammons?
Thank you. So one of the questions just a quick comment to thank you for the update. I actually took the survey because I do ride not only on demand, but there was a time period where there was actually a few of us from Auburn that would take the bus over from Auburn to Roseville and then use the Roseville to get to our county office at the Santucci Center. And so I'm really happy to see that there's more of a project to get these transit agencies on board because there seems to be a huge need for coordination, especially for riders that have to use multiple bus routes. And so if they miss one bus and you spoke to the frequency need, then they're done. And a lot of these riders are going to services in Placer County. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing the culmination of this. And yeah, because it's sorely needed. We're a growing county, and I think our transportation needs to keep up with that.
Agreed. Yeah, that's definitely one of the highlights that we want to bring out of this effort is how we can most effectively coordinate all 3 transit agencies together.
I have one quick question. Can you talk a little bit more about the conversations that's been had about North Auburn? And because we have on-demand service that ends up, we're not going to tell a senior that we're not going to take them to the doctor just because they're a mile past our city limits or a half mile. And so we've been serving a lot of different folks within North Auburn. We brought it up to the supervisors that we thought coordination or maybe there needed to be co-funding of those activities. Has there been any more going on with how we can better serve North Auburn with an on-demand system since there's obviously a demand there?
Yeah, agreed. So are you getting it?
Is that a Benjo comment?
I wasn't sure.
He stood up.
I wasn't sure. Yeah, so as you stated, we serve a lot of locations in northern Auburn. A lot of the resources are there. Doctors, hospitals, offices, shopping. So within this effort, we would like to coordinate and kind of align better our service areas because right now there are a lot of overlap between us and Placer County Transit. So one of the main objectives from this effort is to really see on a map our service area versus their service areas and try to coordinate and move freely within both.
Okay.
I know riders don't necessarily understand jurisdictional lines. I know the city of Auburn's are not the most straightforward. So we're doing our best to try to make the most sense of that for the community so they can move freely within both.
That's great. Yeah, I think there just definitely needs to be more of a partnership between there because we don't want to drop them off at the city limits and say, wait for a bus to pass by. So yeah, I think that's great that you're working on that. Menjo, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I just wanted to thank Natalie for her effort. She's been working pretty closely with the city of Roseville, Placer County Transit, and the team that's doing this comprehensive operational analysis. And I'll say she's a much better transit manager than I was. And she's taking really great strides in making sure that exactly what you're saying, that coordinated effort. I think you guys are going to be pleased with the maps that she's going to present to you when we finally look at this.
Great. Yeah, there's several of us who have experience with trying to work with multiple agencies together, so we can sympathize with how challenging sometimes it can be. So thank you for all your efforts.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
I would just like to say, with regard to this, anyway, on transit, is that just as an FYI, the general fund does subsidize transit to some degree, and it would be great to be able to have it sustain itself at some point. But I know that, that's a discussion for another day, but when we're looking at our rates and so forth, transit's important and I appreciate that, but I just also think about our general fund dollars and trying to, spread them as far as we can. And so just making a statement, but thank you very much for your report. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 18.
Oh, you have to have public comment.
Oh, sorry. Public comment. I apologize that I missed that. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 18. Direction to staff regarding potential transient occupancy tax increase ballot measure.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this item is on your agenda at the discussion during our previous budget meeting to try to figure out how to raise additional revenue to help offset our budget deficit. So what staff's asking for tonight is just basically direction on would you like us to move forward with bringing back a resolution to place a ballot measure or not? And I'll talk about kind of the the intricacies of all that. So we've been looking into possible revenue enhancement opportunities as plugging this budget deficit hole that we have. One of the idea that we've discussed is a modification to the city's TOT ordinance. So there's two modifications that staff has evaluated in the staff report here. The first is an increase of the TOT, the actual tax, from 8% to 10%. And then the second would be an expansion of the definition of operator, which is part of the actual ordinance that we have, to include short-term rental operator. So basically right now, if you're a short-term rental operator, Airbnb, VRBO, even probably a bed and breakfast, those folks don't pay the TOT at all. There's no mechanism for them to actually pay it through our ordinances. And so looking at like a fairness and equity kind of a situation with folks staying in the city, impacting city services, that's one mechanism to help offset that cost, is to include those short-term rentals into the city's TOT ordinance. And so that's one way of looking at resolving that issue. The other is just increasing the TOT tax itself from 8% to 10%. Local cities nearby us, neighboring jurisdictions, have increased theirs from 8 to 10%, including Roseville, Lincoln, and Rockland, and I believe Colfax as well. Auburn, Loomis, and Placer County, the unincorporated part of the county, are the three that are still at 8%. Tahoe is at like a gazillion percent with all the different stuff that they have. So we kind of pull them out as an outlier. But so just the three jurisdictions are still at 8%. Any increase to TOT and including Airbnb or short-term rentals into our TOT ordinance, both of those actions require a vote. The city's required to bring forward any ballot measure by July 3rd, including the actual ordinance language, to do that. We actually brought this forward in 2016, I'm pretty sure it was November 2016, for a vote to the people. Same exact ballot measure. That ballot measure failed with only 40% supporting it. So if council gives direction to move forward, we already have the ordinance language written. We have ballot language that we could use, although I think it would be good for us to kind of look at that and figure out whether or not we should kind of tweak that language, look at what Roseville and Rockland recently did for sure, and how we can kind of basically steal the language that they've already used, but obviously change it to fit us. To be honest, staff, I've been looking at this for the past couple of weeks. I have some concerns about putting anything on the ballot now. And the reason for that is we only have basically 2 weeks to prepare all the language, and we can get that done. That's not an issue. Gary works pretty quickly. So I'll say Gary can get that done. But the concern, the biggest concern that I have is, there's a tight time frame for a proper campaign to be mounted to support that potential measure. I'll tell you that I know that Rockland and Roseville, when they did theirs, they did it as basically a joint thing. They did it together. The city has talked to the county about doing a joint measure as well. The county's not going to be putting anything forward in November, so the city would, if we moved forward with this, would be doing it without the benefit of the county also working towards that. And then both Rockland and Roseville had at least a year of polling, campaigning to get a campaign stood up. Once if the city put the measure on the ballot, once that's done, the city can't provide any direct funding to the campaign. We can't use public money for a campaign. We can provide information, which we would do, but we can't actually campaign. And the concern that I have is I don't know of any organization. I haven't frankly been able to talk to anybody, but I'm not sure that there's a campaign organization that would be taking on moving this forward to success at the ballot if we push it forward. Obviously, the city does have a budget crunch. If we did both measures, so if we increased from 8 to 10% and then also included the short-term rentals, the 8 to 10% would raise about $82,000 total. This is numbers that have been prepared for us by HDL, which is our sales tax consultant, who also has a short-term rental wing to their organization. $82,000 for the actual tax measure, and then the Airbnb side would increase revenue by about an additional 80,000. So you're looking at about 162,000 of potential new revenue if the measure passed in November. If we only did the Airbnb side, so going to voters and asking for voters to have Airbnb, I should say short-term rentals, pay TOT, that at the 8%, because we wouldn't be increasing the 8 to 10%, that 8% would be about 67,000 of new revenue. So it's less obviously than what we were talking about previously. That's kind of all that I got. I do need to get direction from council though, because looking at preparing for the November or for the June 24th council meeting, to have that language ready to go for the July 3rd deadline at the county to get something done. So I can answer questions if you have them. One thing I should add too quickly, the analysis that HDL did on the short-term rental, there's a total of 43 rental properties within the city limits. Estimated average nightly rate is $180, and the estimated annual occupancy is about 27%, which is pretty low. But that is the work that HDL did on our behalf. I can answer questions if you have any.
Councilman Mark? Yeah. So I know we have a very strict Airbnb ordinance. I haven't looked at it lately. So is the 43 just taken from individuals who actually came to the city and told us they have Airbnbs? Where did we get that number?
The 43 is an analysis that HDL did looking at the Airbnb website, VRBO website, and any other information that they were able to glean. But basically looking at those two places where if you were going to come to Auburn, stay in a short-term rental, where you would likely go.
Where they had. So it's basically based on advertisement, not necessarily property owner
Underground.
came in and said, we have an Airbnb.
Right.
Okay.
Or is it both? Did they look at what the city has number and then also look what was advertised, or they just looked at what was advertised?
They just looked at what was advertised.
And, okay. Okay. That's all I have initially.
I don't have,
Oh, okay. Well,
I'd asked my questions earlier.
I have a few more.
Okay. Are there any, do you?
Well,
I got a few more after.
was how many established overnight locations do we have? I think you mentioned it, but I'm looking at like the motels and hotels and
The motels and the hotels are already paying the TOT because they're operating and it's part of the ordinance. So they're already required to pay the TOT tax. I don't know, frankly, off the top of my head, how many rooms we have. that pay that. But the Airbnb or short-term rentals, there's 43 active listings on those various websites that one would look at to rent a short-term rental.
I'm wondering how Powers Mansion Inn is coming along and doing their repairs to get back in operation.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can bring it back to council next week and give you an update from the building department.
Okay, thank you.
They have a
Councilor
lot of
Salmon,
work.
do you have any questions?
Well, that was good. Council Vice Mayor Amara already asked about the rentals and how was that figured out from Airbnb. I mean, just for kicks, I looked it up last week. Somebody had asked about Western states. Well, you can always do Airbnb. Be nice if got a little money out of it, meaning the city. So,
The short-term rental side of it is basically it's like an equity and a fairness thing, right? Because if you're running an actual hotel, you're required to pay that TOT tax. But if you're advertising short-term rental, you don't have to pay that. And so that issue for me is one of the ones where I think that's something that we need to definitely look at. It does need to go to voters though, and considering that the city can't campaign for that, and we've only got the 6 months before the election, not even 6 months now. There's a little bit of concern about that, but that's it.
Councilwoman Mar? Yeah, so what I hear you saying is that you feel like there's a better chance to just have the Airbnb go forward at an 8% rate? Is that what I hear you saying?
I'm not a campaign consultant and I haven't done any polling, but just anecdotally talking to folks, I think that it would be easier to get voters to look at the fairness side of if you're operating a hotel, you already have to pay the TOT because the ordinance requires you to do it. And you can have an Airbnb be right next door and they don't have to pay it. Right. So you can make that argument pretty easily. And for the city to provide the informational side of that, that's an easy thing to do as well. Whether or not it would pass, I don't know. I did want to add one thing too. In the report, there's the section for the fiscal impact. I didn't have the actual cost for that, but Amy was able to get it for me.
Oh, yeah.
So the cost of adding a ballot measure would be about $15,000 total for just the cost of that specific measure.
So if we had both of them on the same measure, it'd be 15,000.
Still 15,000.
Okay.
So would they would have to be separate or would they be together?
You could do either way.
They would be together. So it would be a single ballot question to adopt a revision to the city's TOT ordinance. So it'd be one ballot measure that you would place.
But you
on-
could
on
do
the ballot.
two.
You could do,
Separate them out.
you could,
You could just pursue one and
Or
not the
just
other, I
pursue
think is what.
yeah.
That's what I just didn't, so if we did them on the same ballot, they could be together, but if we want to do them on separate ballots, they can be separated and that's fine to do,
Or you could do one or the other.
one or the other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or none.
Oh,
Or
just,
none.
a couple more questions. So getting to the TOT, so that's basically a tax for the use of visitors who come into our town that are using our infrastructure, our police, our fire. And so the rate, I looked it up, the state rate throughout the state is about 12%. So we're definitely below.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I also looked up Colfax. I don't know what they did before, but they put it on, it passed their city council May 25th and put it on it came for election November. So they were kind of late in the game and that passed, but there's, anyway. So I guess my question is, it is not an ideal time, and it takes some energy, but I think facing this, we have a budget issue. And if we wait, when would we do it? I mean, what would be our next opportunity in your?
Yeah, so the next opportunity would be 2026. The elections during 2026, right? 2026, 2028. So every 2 years, basically, unless there was some other special election that we would be able to
Which is
tie
more
into and,
typically-
right. And I would certainly not recommend that we run a special election specifically for this because that would.
But if there's something else that happens, we could
Right.
attach it
We
onto
could-
somebody else's special
could
election
tie into
or
it.
primary or something that's going on at the
Right.
time.
Right. There'd be an additional cost. It would be more than the 15,000, but it would be less than doing a special election on our own, obviously.
Based on your experience, do you think it would be more challenging also to do it during a presidential election when there's a lot of messaging going on and maybe sometimes harder to reach people because there's so much going on at the time of a presidential election?
So this is the reason why I wish our friend Aldo was still around. I actually sent him a text message 2 weeks ago to ask him that question.
Oh.
And he said that he wasn't feeling up to answering. So I don't want to play campaign guy.
Okay.
I think that the prevailing wisdom is that the more voters you have, the better chance you have of getting a tax passed. And so you have more voters in a presidential election versus a primary.
Okay.
But that's kind of like conventional wisdom and doesn't always hold true. It depends on where you're at too. So I can't really say. I don't really know off the top of my head.
But in general, it tends to be better to give yourself more time to do your messaging and get things out. I
That's
know that Auburn has had a history of doing things at the last minute that didn't go very well. So that's why I'm kind of hesitant to throw it on the ballot. Like the last one was when I ran for office. That was the last one that didn't pass. And the messaging was struggling. I know I was asking, while I was campaigning, I was getting asked a lot of questions that there wasn't a good place to get answers from.
Yeah, so yeah, you're 100% right. For example, in Loomis is putting the library tax on. We started polling for the library tax in February, I think. So almost not quite a year. No, it was February of last year.
Yeah.
So like 18 months before the ballot measure is actually going to be on, we started polling, and the polling could be paid for by the city using city funds because it's gathering information for a potential decision. And what that does is it helps you craft the messaging so people understand what they're voting on, right? Right now, we don't have the capacity. We won't be able to do polling from the city side. A campaign could certainly do that. I don't know where that campaign would come from.
The other question is, if we do partner with the county, as we had talked about before, we had some budget challenges and decided to move this up. Would we be able to share in some of those costs around polling and messaging and have the benefit of having North Auburn and Auburn having the same kind of conversations at the same time?
Assuming that the county would be willing to share those costs, I would assume so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and inevitably, we know when you say to Auburn goes to North Auburn and vice versa. So
Exactly.
inherently, even if we didn't share costs, we'd still be getting benefits from that conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Councilmember Amara talked about that it's, people who are coming here are the folks who pay the taxes. That's 100% right. Most people, well, I won't say most people, but there tends to be a misperception that if you vote for a TOT tax, you're taxing yourself. That's not the case at all. The people who are voting for the tax aren't the people who pay for it, unless for some reason you decide to stay in a hotel in the city where you're living at, right? So,
Which is probably
could happen, I guess, if you're on a staycation or something. But it's not the people who are living here that are voting for the tax are the ones who would pay for the tax. But getting that message to voters is difficult.
One, most people have never heard of a TOT.
They don't know what it is. Exactly.
Oh, and I certainly understand that. I mean, just getting back to your fairness point for putting it on. First of all, I think there's three things that we need to consider. Number one,
Are we doing comments now? Or are we still asking questions?
Are we done with questions?
No, I haven't done it. I mean, I was
Okay.
just wondering.
All right, we're moving on to comments. Go ahead.
thank you. So in number one, we have to decide, we're at a kind of a very difficult time here, and I think we have to do everything we can possibly do. And, and again, maybe we can save, one person if we do this and it passes. I think we have to look at that right now. We are where we are. And I think that the budget speaks for itself. And so that's an incentive for us to really work hard and put it out there. Number two, I think we have to look at this. This is different. It's not a tax on our locals. It's a user tax that will come from visitors who are, I'm sure our police go to hotels all the time and are answering, I mean, I can name a few hotels that they probably frequent. And fire and roads, potholes. So, you know, this is education. So it's not like putting on a sales tax. It's a little different from my perspective. It's more of an educational concept. And then the Airbnb, yeah, I agree totally. It's really crazy that we haven't had any type of fee. I don't think I've ever gone on a vacation where I haven't paid tax on an Airbnb. And let's face it, that is where people are staying now, or Airbnb. So, you know, I just like to see this maybe move forward two more weeks so we can talk about it. You said, our city manager said that you've kind of told people on your own. I think it's good for us to maybe let's spend 2 more weeks and see, you know, see what we can do, come back. And we still have a little time. You said we have some drafts. It wouldn't be that hard to look at some drafts and, you know, see where it goes in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that the county, we need to have, if the council decides to put the measure forward, we need to have the ballot language approved by council, the ordinance approved by council into the county by July 3rd.
Yeah.
And so if we move it to January 24th for a potential decision,
June.
June, that gives us 3 days
Yeah.
to put language together, 4 days maybe.
But you said Gary works fast.
He does work fast.
I think the goal was to have the language mostly put together by the next meeting, if that's what.
And have it be approved.
To be approved.
Yeah.
So then you would just have 3 days to submit it because the language would already be created. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilwoman Duncan.
Thank you very much. I have a lot to say on this matter. First of all, I will say that I agree with my colleagues on the basis that we should be fair and equitable, and that Airbnbs should be subject to the TOT because they are the same as the hotel rooms. They provide beds for those visitors. And I understand that when the TOT was initially established, we didn't have Airbnbs, and so we never went to the voters and moved them in. But I do not agree, and I will not support moving forward with any proposal for TOT in this election cycle for a number of reasons. First of all, I recognize the fact that we are in a fiscal emergency. We just we asked staff to prepare a resolution to declare a fiscal emergency. We have a huge deficit. We need to get our house in order first before we go to the voters and ask for anything. I recognize that TOT is paid by visitors. I understand that. But the voters, they are the ones that still have to vote on it. And I am not prepared to ask the voters to implement any kind of a tax increase until we have done our due diligence to get ourselves out of this hole. So I cannot, in good faith, go to the voters in this election cycle. We're talking about, if we just went with the TOT to include Airbnbs at 8%, we're talking about $67,000. $67,000, I know that's something. No, if it's at 8%, if it was 8%, then it would be $67,000. It costs $15,000 to get on the ballot. Again, with all due respect, I am not ready to go to the voters at this time. I think that the second thing is the timeliness. Our city manager mentioned, okay, we can work fast, but we have no committee in place. We have no group that's willing to shepherd this through. We can't do it as a city. We have failed time and time again without being prepared. We talk about on this council the importance of planning ahead. Other jurisdictions that have been successful planned ahead. Colfax is tiny, but Rockland and Roseville, Loomis, they took time. They did their due diligence. They did polling. They did education. They had other groups that were willing to push this through to the finish line. We don't have any of this. Also, again, the revenue is there's not enough. I also, we had entered, when I was mayor, we started this discussion with the county about a joint effort on TOT increase. We thought we would bring our TOT up to 10%. which would be consistent with all the other cities in our jurisdiction. And it would be a joint effort. And again, I would hope that we would partner in our efforts to promote an education, all those important things, we'd be able to partner with them. And it would be the same here as in North Auburn, where there are other hotels as well. And I think that our opportunity and chance for success when we're partnering with the county is much greater than if we go at it on our own. And it certainly would be more affordable, in my opinion. And I think that we truly need to wait until we are able to partner with the county on that effort. And they're not willing to move forward in this election. The PCTPA ballot measure has been, I can't remember if they've approved that, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be approved for November. That doesn't affect us here in the city of Auburn, but that is something that the county is certainly supportive of so far. So with that said, I cannot support any motion to move forward with a TOT election in this election cycle. I just don't see it being passed. And more importantly, I believe that we need to get our house in order and make some more cuts before we ask the voters for anything. We did this to ourselves. We need to get out of it. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
I just want to say one thing to that. I don't think anyone is advocating. I think we're all on the same page. We have to get our house in order, but I think we also have to plan ahead. I mean, even if it passed in November, we would not realize any type of funds until the following year. So that's all I'm saying.
Councilman Holmes?
Yes, there have been several figures suggested here, but I'm wondering, we are now at 8%, and how much additional revenue would the city get by going to 10%?
82,000.
What's that?
82,000. 8% to 10% on TOT. That doesn't include the Airbnb. Just straight hotel tax. 8% to 10% would raise about 82,000, actually 82,500.
Oh, okay, all right.
Did you have any comments, since we're doing the comments piece of this?
Well, I'm in agreement with Alice and Sandy, I think, about trying to do that at this point, or in November anyway, to go to the voters.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Sierra Sammons?
Sounds like we're all on the same page. I'm uncomfortable with this. I believe there should be some fairness and equity, but not just the city of Auburn, but our school districts have a history of slapping together a ballot measure with absolutely no time, no real time in planning. And I just don't see it being successful for this year, and not because it's an election year, but just because it needs to be thought out. This needs to be seen as a response to the realities of economic downturn, not necessarily a reaction to a budget crisis. I think if we see this and act on it and plan on it as a response to the economy, that's one thing. And I think that's something that people can support. But as my counterparts have mentioned, we do need to get ourselves out of this. I don't think this is the right time. The timing is suitable. I mean, that's just too much of a burden for our staff to slap together something that, quite frankly, I don't see is going to be successful.
Can I just
Thank you. Can I
address that real fast?
Can I do mine real fast,
Yeah.
and then I'll let you? Thank you.
But I think they're misunderstood.
I understand that Councilwoman Amaro wants to move forward quickly and wants to go in this.
Okay, do they understand?
I don't know if that got quite across, by the way.
Actually, I agree with Councilwoman Alice.
Okay, so
stance.
I
So
wanna
that's
make
what I
sure that-
agree with.
Sandy made some very good points. She was trying to, but she would want to move faster than Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo. Just to make sure everyone's on the same page. As far as it goes with me, the amount of money we're talking about here won't fix our budget problems. We have to make some more significant cuts as our staff has been working on, and our budget is, as we'll see shortly, is looking better. Our deficit is looking better, but we've still got some work to do. but this won't fix it. I agree with Councilman Dowd and Cavillo. One of the things that I said when I was running for office, when I was talking to folks about the tax increase at that point, is that the trust wasn't there from the community in order for them to trust us with giving us more money, because we hadn't shown that we were getting the basics right and we were doing everything that we needed to do in order to have our financial house in order. So I think that's a critical thing for us to be able to show the community before we increase taxes. I also agree that it makes logical sense for us to have the TOT apply to Airbnbs as well as hotels. That makes logical sense. But as everyone knows, I'm the planner and I like planning things, which is, we've been working on many things, and unfortunately with planning, nothing goes quickly, but normally you end up more successful in saving time and money and energy in the end. So I would agree with the fact that we need to plan this out. I don't want to do another unsuccessful ballot measure. I would consider doing the TOT by itself first, if there was a big interest from the council in doing that. But I think it makes sense to go with the county. I think what I would want, because since I've got on council, we have been talking about diversifying revenue and made very little progress over the last 3.5 years. And so what I would want us to do is not just say we can't do it now, but say we're going to do it in 2026 and we're going to start now. And we're going to start moving forward, and we need to start making some progress and committing to some things that we're going to do in order to increase revenue, because the city has a habit of saying, no, we can't do that right now, and not taking any steps in the right direction. And then we end up being in the exact same place a couple of years down the road and going, wow, we wish we would have done that a couple of years ago. So I would really like from the council to commit to picking that time, whether it be 2 years from now, or if something earlier comes up, starting the process of figuring out that polling, starting the process of working with the county, making sure that they're in for 2026 and moving that forward so we can start making some progress, rather than just saying not now and then getting busy doing other things and going, oh shoot, it's the June before the election again and we don't have time to put anything together. So that's my thought on is I want to make sure that we are successful, that we're using all of our resources, we're planning this out. But in order to do that, I think we need to start now and start organizing and figuring things out so we're successful at that later date. Councilwoman Amara, I promised you next.
Yeah, no. So yeah, just to be clear, I'm suggesting that we put it on for November. I think it's doable. I think we can do it. But at the very least, then an Airbnb, because we're in line with every other city. We need to move forward. And I do agree with you. When we don't do things, we put it off and things get in the way, other things happen. And at the very least, we do need to put the Airbnb on there, but I'd like to see both this November, and I think we can do it. I think we can educate people, because I think it's far different than a sales tax. It's far different than a school bond. It's again, people using our services and not paying for it. We talked about our sewers, and the users are using our sewers as much as the locals, and we're paying for it. So I would like to see both put forward, but at the very least, I have some interest in the Airbnb.
I appreciate the thought about planning out. I'm hesitant to commit because, we don't know what the council is going to, any commitment wouldn't necessarily have any kind of legal binding. I mean, we don't know what the council makeup will be. There may be other opportunities. We don't know what's going to happen in a year or 2 years from now. I have always been one that said that Airbnb should be on the same playing field, that they should be treated the same as the hotels. And I agree with that. I don't want to commit on a specific time because there are so many different factors right now. And there could be other opportunities for us to pursue that might have bigger payouts. So I don't want to be more descriptive than that, but I wouldn't be comfortable committing to the next election. I certainly am supportive of at some point, but I just don't know when that time is right now.
I would be fine with committing staff for the next 4 or 5 months to figuring out the details and trying to come up with a plan of how we would implement that, because that we do have control over, even if the council changes in November, we can start moving things forward. I think we need to start doing something. Is there any other comments? Okay. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Mayor and Council, Saul Brocker. Yeah, I had a thought on this because I wasn't at the last meeting when I heard there was a budget issue. But my mom was telling me about it and I was thinking about the revenue issue. And this is just my 2 cents, just a thought I had. But one thing to think about, Sean may know a lot better with the numbers, whether this is something that even needs to be thought about. But if you're gonna enact a tax, you probably want to tax things that aren't going to be self-negating, in the sense that like if you tax Airbnbs or hotels, I mean, maybe Sean's considering this already, but obviously you want to increase tourism because they spend money in the city. And if you increase the tax, but it decreases consumption on the stays in the hotel, then it decreases spending in the town, and then it would partially cancel the increased revenue, right? So that was just one thing that, or like, anyway, so
I get what you're
you get
saying.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Yeah. So, okay.
Absolutely. It's a good point. I don't know how many people look at the city TOT tax as a barrier because it's very small, but it's worth thinking about.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor Riddell Harris, council members, Rob Haswell, run the Welcome Center here in town, visit Placer. Just wanted to speak on this item. Obviously, it's in the tourism realm, and it's become a very standardized mechanism for deferring infrastructure impacts. And as we noted in Sean's report, we are well below state average. We are a destination that's becoming an increasingly popular one. I set aside the idea of this being a fiscal fix for a problem. I mean, I look at this as a long overdue, investment in Auburn's infrastructure. And the other thing I want to, I have worked with our friend Aldo on several of these types of things. And so I could talk a little bit from the campaign side of it. And it's really important in these issues, how you word the question. It's super important, probably more important than anything else. I would urge the folks that are making these decisions to look at what has recently been successful, and how they worded it versus how Auburn worded it in 2016, which if you have looked at that, there's no question to me why it didn't pass. It was one of the most poorly written, increases. I mean, I'm no offense to anyone here if they were part of it, but being in the political world, how words matter, and telling people, people want to see oversight. They want to see what the monies are going to be used for, right? They want to see that it's money that's local and won't be taken by the state. There's ways that this can be super successful, even in a short time frame. It is harder, when you don't have a committee in place. But I will say this, contrary to what we heard, Aldo was part of the team that helped Roseville. Rockland really didn't have a team, and they had. On the front end, they did all the things right in terms of how they put the measure forward. But I think if you look at Colfax, again, I know they're small, but it's a situation where, again, do things right on the front end, and you're going to have a real good opportunity, to pass this type of measure with the voters. And again, I see it completely different, in respect to, the folks that are worried about, that the fiscal ask on our voters. I mean, what we're really asking our voters to do is to allow us to have our visitors, pay for the infrastructure that they use. And that is fundamentally a different ask to me. We have to articulate it, there's no doubt, but it is a fundamentally different thing. I worked on the the failed, fire safety measure that we did a few years ago. And that's a tougher ask, because it is on our residents. And, so again, I want to, and the other thing I'll say is, if you put them both on and you got $164,000 potential revenue first year, right? You're taking a $15,000 bet against that revenue stream by putting it on the ballot. I don't see that as a fundamentally huge gamble. I mean, in poker, that would be considered a very good, fair, you're getting great value, if you go forward with that. So I want to encourage you guys to be bold at times. I think this isn't a time to be, to be kind of pulling our punches, right? I think the timing's right. I think the fact that 3 jurisdictions passed this exact tax, one smaller, one very late, 2 larger communities. I think it's right for Auburn to do it. And, if you pushed it out 4 years, you're talking about potentially what, $600,000-$700,000 lost revenue if it were to pass this time. So I just, I want to just share that from a person who lives and works in the visitation world. I don't see this at all like I would see a normal community assessment or tax. It's a different beast. So I just wanted to get that on the record with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for your perspective so much. Okay. Is there any other public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the
Any
council.
public comment in line, Amy?
Well, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay,
I'd like to make a motion to direct staff regarding a potential ballot measure. Do I have to do this by way of motion, or can we, my first, I'm sorry, right in the middle of my
go for it.
motion.
Yeah.
My first ask was that we bring it back one more time and see what the language looks like, so that we can talk among people and think about it a little for a couple more weeks. Do I need a motion for that, or is that direction?
yeah, we do have, if we wanted them to make up the language, they would have the time.
You would have to have a motion.
Yeah,
Is that right, Gary?
Yeah, I think staff would like a motion, so we have direction on what a majority of you would like us to put together.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we could, the staff could provide us with a potential ballot measure to amend section 30 of subchapter 33.185 of the Auburn Municipal Code regarding the city's transit occupancy tax to change the definition of an operator and then impose an obligation to collect the TOT by short-term rental operations and increase the TOT from 8 to 10%.
Second.
okay. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
No.
Amara,
Yes.
Holmes,
Aye.
Sierra Sammons,
Aye.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Motion carries. So staff will bring back the potential ballot measures for another conversation at the next city council meeting. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 19, the one we've all been waiting for. Gretchen, come on down. Hey, I'm trying to keep it lively. The budget is going to be a long conversation.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Gretchen Johnson, your finance director. So tonight I am bringing forward the 24-25 proposed budget to receive feedback and any direction from the council. This is considered your draft budget, and in 2 weeks on June 24th, we'll be bringing back the final budget, which will probably look very similar to this, pending any direction that we receive.
You're good.
All right, so the action requested is to solicit your feedback for the proposed budget, as I mentioned. Citywide, we are looking at $35,096,572. And that includes a general fund budget of about 20 million at 19.9. We have 2 enterprise funds for the airport and the sewer, of $10.8 million. We have about 13 special revenue funds at almost $4 million and a redevelopment fund for $320,000. Part of this effort is to set the general fund reserves as well, and that will be at $5,129,491. And then each year we need to set our appropriations limit, which I will explain towards the end of this presentation, at 24 million.
Yeah, it's the other way.
A little bit of background. Last time we presented the budget was just last month on May 13th. We focused on the general fund and we kind of highlighted, daylighted the structural deficit that began in fiscal year 22-23, 1.6 million at that time. Again, another 1.6 million the following year in 23-24. And then for the budget year we're working on, the initial budget was a 1.9, almost a $2 million deficit. We knew that we were going to go back and rework and see what we could do to reduce that, which we have, which we'll see here in a minute. And then looking forward into the future over the next 5 years, we were at $1.3 million forecasted annually, no less than that amount, looking into future years for the deficit. So back in May, the solutions to balance the budget were to reallocate $750,000 in ARPA funding from business improvement districts and another $131,000 from the city's scanning project to fund city's operating expenses. We looked at and received your direction to go ahead and use $500,000 of reserves from our employee unfunded liability, $293,420 from economic uncertainties, and finally $250,000 from our pension unfunded liability reserve. So we've done 3 things, A, B, and C, as I've labeled them, to rework our budget. So the first was that after May 13th, we went back and the city manager and staff achieved $846,786 in net budget reductions. And most of that came from the hiring freeze that was established back in May 24th. And from that, we achieved 4 positions that have been frozen: police officer, a records communication supervisor in police, a firefighter, and a finance technician. I did want to say that, the hiring freeze, though it has solved a big portion of the savings you see here, it's not without implications. So I can speak personally for the finance technician. We've been before you in the past. Finance department is short on staff, needs more staff. And now we got the staff and now it's frozen. So it's really unfortunate, the timing of that. I think I can speak for most of our departments with hiring freezes that we're very lean already. We're trying to do what we can. So it's definitely not without implications. Other solutions to bridge the gap. We got some updated insurance estimates for workers' comp, general liability, property insurances, and et cetera. So that was a good news of $120,000 that we could reduce costs there. We looked at our cost allocation methodologies a little bit for what type of general fund costs we can allocate to our other funds. Made sure that that was appropriately being done. There's more work to be done on that, but in the time that we had, we were able to come up with $159,000 of savings to the general fund. Equipment and building improvement costs deferred. I think deferred is a key word here. These are pretty much one-time solutions for deferring building and equipment costs that should be done on the norm, which we're deciding to kick the can a little bit just because of our budget situation. However, at some point, we're going to need to purchase replacement equipment and take care of our buildings. There is an implication with that to our capital improvement plan specific to the general fund. Our capital improvement plan is in development. Public Works is putting that together and continues to drive that forward. However, what I saw during the budget development, particularly for the general fund, is that a lot of the general fund needs are not funded in that capital plan. And so those remain unfunded, and therefore our capital plan is suffering a bit. And then operational reductions of $77,000 training, uniforms, materials, maintenance, et cetera. So those are choices that were made, but again, it's kind of to the sacrifice of what things we should be doing. We should be training our staff. This is not required training that we're giving up, but it's more of the, let's train our folks, let's build them, let's have a great workforce. Same thing for uniforms, materials, and maintenance. Those are just choices that we made, given the situation, not ideal. And then police department overtime, your police chief is committing to trying to find $25,000 of savings in his overtime budget. But that brings me pause and worry that as we reduce staff, there might be overtime that needs to be done to cover vacant workloads. So we'll see how it pans out. Oh, keep going the wrong way. And then touching again on the American Rescue Plan Act, our ARPA funds. This is a list of projects that has been previously approved by your council, but I wanted to bring it back because at the very bottom, that's where we put in the 881,000 shifting from the business improvement districts and the planning project. I've labeled it as sales tax recovery revenue. Because that is something that is an eligible framework for the use of ARPA funds. And we definitely could use some recovery in our sales tax. So that's what I've labeled it there. And then finally, the use of reserves has changed a little bit for the good. So we reduced the need from using 1 million in reserves to only 195,312. So what that does is it puts our estimated ending fund balance as of June next year, 2025, at 5,129,491. Your list of reserves there are very similar. We still have our economic uncertainties reserve. We still have the pension unfunded liability reserve. We're using still 250,000 of that. That was the reserve that was used the most. And then our prepaid insurance liability for our self-insurance fund went up a little bit, and that is based on those updated estimates and the amount of assigned reserves that we have to keep. Unfunded liability remains at 500,000, and then the unassigned fund balance went down a little bit to 63,000. So what that amounts to is that the city has a financial reserve policy that we like to keep 30% of our total estimated expenditures in reserves, and that 30% would equate to just over that $5 million amount that I noted earlier. We're at 26% versus 30, given this framework. But what this does is it delivers a balanced budget for fiscal year 24-25. Looking at the model again, with all of these updates that we did for fiscal year 24-25, we can see that we have now solved for $1 million deficit with the solutions I just presented. But then in the future years, we still are looking at a minimum of 800,000, about 850,000 on average, looking into the out years. But again, I would still like to mention that what is shown here is current day. So this actually reflects some negotiated labor agreements that are effective July 1st. Those were put in as far as costs, but then nothing else. So we don't have any wage increases through this model into the future because that's unknown. We also don't have any capital improvement plan expenditures in here. There are assumptions for revenue increases as well. So that has been built in. The frozen positions that we have today are here in this outlook. So those positions would stay frozen into the future. How likely all of those things are to remain the same, who knows? But I would be very cautious in thinking that we're at $800,000. I think it's probably going to be $1 million absent any further change moving forward. That's my gut instinct, but I don't want to plan around a gut. I'm just planning around the actual figures that I have available at this time. So addressing the deficit continues. The next meeting on June 24th, we will bring forward the budget for adoption plus any adjustments. Our external auditor is planning to be here to present the fiscal year 22-23 financial reports. As a reminder, that is the first year that the budget deficit began. So they'll be able to speak to that. In August, council meetings will do an overview of the preliminary year-end results for 23-24. Those will be pretty preliminary. The year won't be closed yet, but it'll be a good kind of an early preview of what we're looking at for the current year in terms of final results. I'm sure we'll give a structural deficit status update. And then starting in October, we're going to start doing quarterly updates of the current fiscal year, kind of a financial update of revenues versus expenditures each quarter to keep everyone updated. Okay, so then moving on to the proposed budget itself citywide. This is just a depiction of where the expenses are super high level for the city. General fund making up the majority of the citywide budget at just under 20 million. Then you have your sewer fund at 9.4 million, airport fund at 1.4 million, the 13 special revenue funds making up just under 4 million. And then we have a redevelopment agency trust fund for our redevelopment properties here in the city of 320,000. So a high level look at the general fund itself, you can see that we have revenues and expenses that are just short of one another, necessitating 195,312 in reserves, with again that estimated reserves balance of about 5.1 million. What I've done here is I've just outlined everything that is comprised of in the general fund in terms of an expense. Those are all of your city departments, plus any of the departments or cost areas that do not have staff in them, such as insurance programs and discretionary support, which is for your committees and commissions, et cetera. And then non-departmental down at the bottom, that is for your pension obligation payments and the unfunded liability payments. So the revenue detail, apologies, the slide didn't turn out too well here, but the revenue detail has sales tax and property taxes as the city's largest revenue streams, followed by franchises, licenses, fines, et cetera. That's what makes up your 19.7 million in revenue in the general fund. The airport fund, pretty close to exactly meeting expenses and revenues and balancing the budget there. There is an additional $44,000 that is being added to reserves. That gets the airport fund balance to just shy of $2.3 million for future planned capital projects at the airport. There is a listing of fiscal year 24-25 capital projects there. The airport master plan is a big one, terminal redesign, and then the majority, if not all of the reserves for the airport is planned for a runway extension in the future. The sewer fund is as expected. We have an expense budget of 9.4 million. You saw a lot of detail about this during the sewer rate study item earlier. Revenue at about 7 million, utilizing reserves of about 2.3 million for a lot of those capital projects listed there on the right side of the slide, leaving just shy of $6 million in reserves for future planned projects, the array of sewer projects that you heard discussed earlier. So the city has 13 special revenue funds. I won't go over each one of these in detail, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time on gas tax, transportation, and transit, and also any of the funds that show as a negative fund balance on this slide. So the first one I'll talk about is gas tax. So gas tax is a very specific type of fund where its revenues can only be used for activities for the roads. And so that includes everything from streetlight maintenance to road maintenance and road overlay. So factoring in the planned expenses and revenues, the gas tax fund for those types of activities would include an increase to the reserve balance. And actually, those two numbers are flipped. I saw that earlier. So the increase in reserves is anticipated to be $65,000, and that will result in a estimated reserve balance of $35,000. That is because the gas tax fund is actually beginning in the negative. And then with the revenues and expenditures, we were able to climb out of the negative balance and add a little bit towards reserves. The transportation fund has 729,000 in expenses, and you'll see that revenues are falling quite a bit short at $517,000, necessitating use of reserves of $211,000, leaving almost nothing in the reserves balance, about $2,000. The reason for that is actually what you'll see more on the transportation fund slide coming up, is that transit is beginning to cost more over time due to increasing expenses. Revenues are not as healthy as we would like in transit in terms of like the on-demand revenue, et cetera. And the transportation tax revenues that we're getting in, they have to go to transit first and pay for that. And then anything left goes to our transportation fund. There's not a lot left, if anything, in transit to go to the transportation fund. And so that necessitates utilizing reserves that transportation has, but it also necessitates the general fund contribution this year. And so we've built in $100,000 of general fund contribution to the transportation fund. That was not planned, but we do need to balance the fund out. So likely not going to go to street overlay, that general fund contribution. It's just going to balance the budget and make sure that all of the expenses are paid for. So this is the transportation fund, where you can see that the expenses and revenues come very close to netting out to zero. We're able to get it down to about $500 using reserves to balance the budget. There does remain $18,000 in reserves when all said and done. But again, transit revenue is very specific to its use. So that is just how it balanced out this year. This is also where you discussed the purchases for the new vans. And those are one-time external revenues that will help pay for those two new vans in full. And this is just the special revenue funds to close out the special revenue fund discussion that I thought might be worthy to discuss. There's certainly others that if you have questions, you can let me know. But the Auburn School Park Preserve does have a deficit fund balance of $153,000. We know that that exists, and the plan is that mitigation fees are collected in the service area specifically that pay back the deficit over time. And then we have a community development block grant defederalized funding fund that has a positive balance of $182,000. Those are discretionary funds, one-time funds that can be available for economic development or whatever the council would like to direct those funds be used for. And then the regular community development block grant that has been used for business loans for the city of Auburn. We do have a positive balance of $89,000 in there that can be utilized for a future loan program if that is the choice. And then our solid waste closed landfill deficit fund balance we're now up to 1.4 million. However, there are plans in the works, which I suspect a lot of you know about. The city and Recology are working towards a resolution. It will be brought back to your council in the future with plans to address the deficit in that fund. And then finally, the appropriations or GAN limit, as you might be familiar with. This is just a requirement of any local agency's budget due to a Proposition 4 back in 1979 that limits the amount of tax proceeds that state and local governments can appropriate each year. And so the city has done this every year, and each year it's adjusted for inflation and our population growth. So that puts our appropriations limit at 24 million. So if we had 24 million in tax proceeds, that would be our limit that we could allocate to spend. But we are very below that. We are only at 13.5 million. So this is just kind of a technical formality of the budget process at this point. So I showed this slide earlier, but this is just to wrap up my presentation and show what our next steps will be. I won't discuss them again, but I'll open it up to any questions or comments or direction from the council.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. We really appreciate that. Are there any questions from the council? Councilwoman Dowden-Calvillo, let's start with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate that. And I very much appreciate the work that staff have put in thus far to help us adopt a balanced budget, given the significant deficit that we found ourselves in. Of course, this is just for the 24-25 year, and a lot of the fixes, i.e. the ARPA monies, will not be available moving forward. So we will have to make some difficult choices in the coming year. But I do appreciate all of the departments as well, taking that initial look at their budget and seeing what they can do without. So I do applaud their efforts as well. We're in this together. And so I do appreciate that. On page 259 of the staff report, talks about a 5-year forecast, and the status quo includes no salary increases. Now, this means no COLAs, no negotiated raises. It's just straight salaries. Is that what you're saying on that page? It's page 259.
Yes. So in the out years, the only thing that I've included are the knowns. So we know that there were 3 labor contracts with July 1st increases this year. Those have been built into that model. But looking out into future years, there are no further salary increases because they've not been established yet.
Okay, thank you very much. My list of questions here, and some questions I did ask in advance when I spoke with the city manager earlier today. I understand that the budget does include the fees that we've increased. Just at our last meeting, that additional revenue has been incorporated in this budget, correct? Not very much, but
the planning fees and
Yeah.
such, yes.
yeah. And we hope to bring some of those back, I know, to look more at actual cost recovery. On page 274, there's reference of the SACOG grant at $750,000 as revenue for the 24-25 year. And I think that's the Green Means Go grant, which I don't think is going to be fully funded, given that it's not included. The governor's looking to cut that by half. I know that we are working diligently with the legislature trying to push back on that, so we'll see what happens. But I also recognize that it's for a specific function. So if we only receive half those funds, then we'll only be able to perform half of the service, which is the master plan for the domed area. So,
Right.
but just for the purposes of looking at that may or may not be there. That number could drop.
Right.
It likely will drop. I talked to Sean about on page 281, the undesignated sponsorships versus community projects, because we do have those 2 areas. And I think, Sean, you had indicated that the undesignated sponsorships are various opportunities that you might have to contribute financially on behalf of the city for things like State of the Community and things of that nature. But the community projects is most likely the 4th of July fireworks. I had asked in our last budget planning that we have an actual line item for that, because I felt that it was important that the city contribute to that. And so I'm assuming, and that's what that community project is for, fireworks and things of that nature. Is that correct?
I know the fireworks is still in there. It was not removed. It is likely that line item that you're targeting, if memory serves me correctly, but I know we didn't remove the fireworks.
Okay, so it probably is that. In the past, we've received the committee work plans. I will say, and I want to say this about our committees, I recognize that our committees work very hard. These are volunteers who put forward their time, their energy, and their own finances in some instance to better the city. And I really do appreciate all that they do. I know that a lot of cities actually don't fund their committees. The committees come forward with projects and the city council considers them. Our council's done a little bit differently in that we have given them a budget and then, but we approve their work plans so that we understand what it is that they're suggesting that city monies be spent on. So I would like to ask for a copy of all those committee work plans. I appreciate that everyone's budget's been cut to $5,000. I think that is more than appropriate given the deficit that we're having to make up. But I still want to see those committee work plans before I am willing to approve any of those expenditures.
Okay.
And then also, I know, again, I had mentioned this before, general fund for transit. I don't know how much we spend in general fund on transit. Maybe it's in here somewhere. I apologize. But I ultimately would like to not have that subsidy. I recognize the importance of transit and I want to maintain a transit program. I love our on-demand. Our on-demand has been highly successful, but it's just something that, I would love to shoot that for that, but I'd like to know how much we actually contribute.
So for this year, we took a look at that, and in prior years, there was about $65,000 from our Public Works Maintenance General Fund department that would charge the gas tax fund directly. We took that out because it's kind of a general fund cost anyway. And so right now, the transit fund itself does not have a general fund contribution. It's the transportation fund where we're kind of tied into a $100,000 general fund contribution this year.
Okay, so for transportation, we have $100,000 general fund. And is that a decrease from previous years or?
Transportation is the fund where in recent history has been given $500,000 for road overlay every year. We are not giving that this year. It's only the $100,000 to balance out the fund.
Okay, great. And yes, and I do remember we talked about that because we did an extraordinary amount of paving in the past couple of years. And so we're taking a little bit of a break because of the situation. So thank you very much. I'm going to not make comments. I was just asking questions at this time. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Councilwoman Mark?
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation and your diligence in sorting through all this. I appreciate it. So I'm in the staff report. Okay. So, with actually 261. So on 261, there's the biggest expenditure there is our solid waste closed landfill. Looks like them.
Right, the largest deficit.
Yes, the
Yes.
largest, yes. And, okay, so anyway, I wanted to call your attention to that. On the next page, page 262. Again, I'm just looking at big numbers, and obviously police and fire are our biggest budget item. What does non-departmental stand for? That's at the bottom.
Yeah, non-departmental is just the term that's been used for the budget that maintains the pension obligation
Oh,
payments plus your unfunded CalPERS liability payments.
okay, okay. Thank you. And then on 273, this is the revenue and expenditure detail. So just in reading this right, then for 23-24, we are in a $1.7 million deficit, but in 24-25, it's $195,000 deficit.
Correct. That is because we're submitting a balanced budget using 881 in ARPA as a one-time revenue source, and this 195,000 is our use of reserves.
Okay, so this is all one time. So from here, we have to make cuts so that we can have an ongoing balanced
Correct.
budget.
Right.
Okay, thank you. And then page 281. So again, this is the discretionary support. And so community projects where we allocate 5,000, what is that exactly? Did you ask that? I wasn't listening. I thought you asked about
It was the fireworks and things of that like.
so I thought that was undesignated. Okay, that's wouldn't be sponsorship. Okay, so that's fireworks and that wouldn't be the whole 5,000.
So I actually found that spreadsheet that I filled out and forgot what it was for. So the undesignated sponsorships, the $7,000 is for the fireworks, state of the community dinner, installation dinner, whatever it is. But it's basically fireworks and for the community, state of the community dinner. The 5,000 at the bottom for community projects
Mhm.
is really more of the like undesignated sponsorship. So if something pops up that we wanted to support.
So it's really hasn't been allocated yet.
No.
Okay.
Last year it went to Symphony, the theater, and then the additional money for the
But
theater
we've dropped it
restoration. Right.
significantly.
It went from 65,000 to 5,000.
That was discretionary. I think we had a discretionary grant. That was separate. We're not doing the discretionary grants though this year.
That's why it's went from 65 to 5.
Right.
So the community projects, and thank you for, because I understood it was fireworks.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what we were hearing. So you're saying, and I'm taking your time, I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
Fireworks is coming out of that $7,000 because fireworks is about $5,000.
Right. This year it shouldn't be anything of
Because of the sponsorship.
right.
So the $5,000 is something is really kind of the non-discretionary.
It's leaving some room in case.
It
something
is,
comes up.
it is, yeah. Excuse me. It is discretionary. It's
pretty
not really designated for anything
Okay.
at this point.
Hmm.
In the past, it was always the discretionary grants that came forward that
Mhm.
we brought forward. So last year, Symphony Theater, State Theater, I don't remember what else came forward. But you can see that big drop, right? 65,000 to 5,000.
Yes. Yes.
Because we cut all that out.
Are you done?
Yeah, I guess so. It's just kind of a little bit confusing because we have community projects at 5,000, which we don't know what they are. They just are projects that might come for asking for money. And then we have the other
Undesignated sponsorships.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So on page 283, this is economic development. I'm assuming from 22 to 22, 23, 23, 24, was that a hiring of a position? The salaries went up from 67,000 to almost 300,000.
Yes, I want to say that that is a reclassification from a manager to a department head, but it's also the addition of an administrative assistant.
Okay. And so we're budgeting that for 24, 25 as well.
Yes, however, a lot of this is cost allocated out to other funds. That's the cost allocation adjustment at the bottom of those numbers. So it's not that large of a cost to the general fund.
Page 283.
Cost allocation.
Where do you see, oh, the cost allocation is, where is the cost allocation?
It's right here. See, it's this negative number right here. It's just basically saying that other.
Oh, because of the PERS
Like-
and health and,
Well, it's like sewer and other types of places use planners. So there's
yeah.
other fund sources like.
oh, I
airport
see.
and
So the
things.
cost, okay, the cost allocation is actually 159,000. Okay.
Right,
So it results in about $195,000 to our budget.
right.
Okay, thank you. So then, I'm sorry, I have all these stickies. Okay, so can you just clarify simplistically? I do not, for the life of me, understand the difference between the gas tax, the transportation fund, and the transit fund, and what their use is. So the gas tax is for roads, or is it?
It's used for streetlights, road overlay, and it can offset any of our costs in our public works, road maintenance budget as available, if there's funding available to do so.
So it's mostly roads. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
All.
And what about all roads? So what about the transportation fund? Is that more buses and vehicles?
The transit fund has the
Okay,
vehicles in it. We
phone a
can,
friend.
I know, transportation taxes are, whew, manageable.
Because you know what I'm going to get to.
One, the RTA, which one?
Well, I know it has, but I guess the use in,
So the transportation fund is comprised of the TDA funds, which consists of LTF, which is local transportation fund, STA, state transit assistance, thank you, Natalie, and SGR, which is state of good repair funds. Local transportation funds are required to fund transit first. So let's say, for instance, the city gets $1 million, which is approximately what we're getting this year.
okay.
We have to fund all of our transit operations with those monies first. This year, I would say our transit operations are somewhere around $900,000, and the remainder of that, call it $100,000, can then be put into the transportation fund, Fund 26, to be utilized for streets and roads projects.
Okay. So when I hear you saying, answering a question from Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo, that we are taking money and supporting our transit, that's not really correct.
Yes and no, right? So we're not taking transportation funds I'm sorry, we're not taking general funds to support transit per se. So, but we're using all the local transportation funds for transit. And because council has previously made a commitment to support the transportation fund, we are now taking general funds to cover those costs, which have been eliminated in this budget cycle, if that makes any sense.
Thank you.
You bet.
And then my question is, where's the bike fund?
So there is a component of local transportation funds that's associated with bike and pedestrian funds. The city does not claim those on an annual basis because they are approximately $17,000 to $20,000. So they don't amount to any real project. We do it in a 5-year period and get about $100,000 in which we can do bike lanes.
I got that. But I guess my point is, can we have our own little fund for when we get our plan and then eventually use some of our money from one of these funds?
So any LTF fund that's remaining that's not used on transit is eligible for council to make those decisions to put it towards that. I'll say that.
So how much is eligible at this point in time?
This current fiscal year, we're talking about slightly less than $100,000, which we are using for other transportation related projects.
Roads?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but so that theoretically could be used for a bike fund to support making bike trails once we get our bike plan.
That is one of the eligible uses for those
Okay,
funds.
thank you. I just want to make that clear, and I'd like to see that at some point in time. I don't know if the other council agree, but I think that's been one of our goals. And then my last sticky is over here. So the ARPA, when you point out on page 323, you point out the ARPA money. These are all spent money that was been spent from the ARPA.
Either spent or in process or planned to be spent.
Okay, and that's over 2 million.
The 24-25 budget has actually less than 2 million. I caught this earlier. So the revenue recovery of 881,000 that we've reallocated to cover our budget deficit.
Oh, yeah.
That's baked into that $2.2 million. It shouldn't be.
Oh, it shouldn't be there.
Yeah. So just reduce the 2.2 by the 888. You have your answer there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Minus either. Okay. And then the anticipated grant funding. Okay, what Safe Street grants, again, is that for, if I recall, that's for a plan to do bike trails and all this stuff. Thank you, Jonathan.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Jonathan Wright, Community and Economic Development Director. That's specifically for a comprehensive active transportation plan and a safe streets assessment plan. So that we already have that out for RFP. We'll be coming back to you very soon with the consultants,
Good, great, fantastic.
which includes bike lanes and trails and those types of things baked into that.
Then we can get going with our $100,000 that we're going to put into our bike fund along with, and
As
anyway,
Mayor points out, that takes time. So we're in the process, but planning takes time.
but it's coming back, you said, soon?
Yes, we will be working on spending those funds with the consultant very soon.
Oh, I think, okay, so approximately when is it coming back? Just,
I don't want to overpromise. I had it set for the next city council meeting
okay.
to
So
do a
very soon.
contract, but I still have to get through contract negotiations and we're still waiting on one more evaluator to finish up their analysis.
Thank you.
Who's
And
providing-
while you're at it, the form-based code, is that completed?
The draft is, the rough draft is, and now we're working on some refinements to make it more user friendly. It's in RGS's hand and they're working on each chapter and trying to make it so it makes it a little more logical going through it because it is very technical and comprehensive.
And where does that go after? Just, it's becomes. it'll-
Goes to the planning commission through a legislative process and then ultimately comes back to you for adoption
Okay.
or not adoption and recommendation and instruction.
And then I think Councilwoman Dowden Cavillo asked the question, and I probably wasn't listening, the domes master plan
Correct.
grant, is
Let
that,
the green means go and right now we've told the consultant, all we have that we've been told we can spend is 25% of that.
oh,
So we have them working on it vigorously right now. And if you recall, we just got a contract out to AECom about a month ago. So we're really moving to get this thing going. Because one thing is, there's a fear that if we didn't start on a project, that the whole thing might just disappear.
right, right.
And the other thing was just, we wanted to make sure that we spent the funds that we had currently available. What we're being told now is that we're maybe looking at a 50% cut total. So the next year we'll maybe have another quarter to work on. AECOM's aware of that. We've structured it so that we're actually getting all the data and all the information that we can up front. So even if the money does get pulled, we have products that we can use going forward in the future for a continuation of this project at some point.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, and that's all the
I was
questions.
just gonna say on that same issue though, here it says 550,000, but that other line item, it had it at 750,000.
I believe that included the form-based code of 120.
Right here.
Because there's
So it's on that other page, the 750, because the original grant was for 750 for Green Means Go for the dome.
It's 650.
650, okay. I thought it was 750. Okay, 650, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, that's all the questions I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Holmes, do you have any questions?
Yes.
I didn't see that.
I know when in my personal finance, that if I overspend, sometimes I have to do things like sell stock or
Going to sell buses.
go to another source. And I'm just wondering whether money that we have invested in LAIF and at the county, is there a prohibition on using any of that, taking money out of that to help balance our budget?
Well, the money that are in our investment accounts are all factored into what you've seen in this presentation. It's not additional money that's set aside. It's not a savings account. When we're talking about $5 million in reserves for the general fund, 6 million in reserves for the sewer fund, 2 million in reserves for the airport fund, et cetera. Those reserve balances are what is in those investment accounts earning returns. So our reserves are our savings account.
Yeah. So we are already taking out reserves. They're not extra funds.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Councilwoman Sarah Salmon?
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. My colleagues asked a lot of questions that I had, so thank you. But I did have one that I'll refer to slide 5 on the slideshow, the presentation. under the ARPA, the general plan update, there's a, statement that says the cost will exceed this amount. And I was trying to reconcile the numbers here with the attached spreadsheets. How much are we thinking that we're going to exceed?
Is
I don't
that
know if
on the,
that's
oh,
you
that's
or
on,
Jonathan.
yeah,
Question.
that's the general plan update. So I believe there is an additional 126,000 over and above what we've allocated from ARPA to cover that.
Okay.
And that has been included in the economic development or community development budget, one of those.
So many spreadsheets. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I also want to add my thanks to the staff for doing what they could to help us with this budget deficit, because it wasn't expected by any of us, and we're all trying to work through it together. So I appreciate everyone's hard work bringing that down from 1.9 to 1.1 is great. It's a good start. We're obviously showing that we're not just ignoring the problem and moving forward, but we have plans on fixing it. A big piece of the issue is, from how I see it, is that we have too many staff. Is that how everything else being equal, we haven't done a lot of dramatic changes structurally to the organization other than staff. Is that how you would best interpret this? Is that we have hired more staff than we could afford with the budget that we have?
Yeah, and I think that I alluded to that, discovering my own self, coming in new and looking at the cost that we have. I mean, the largest cost that the city has is the personnel costs. Not just the staff, but then the benefits and liabilities associated with them. And staffing is the most rapid expense that has incurred over the past few years. It's in some departments, they're very lean. So it's not like some departments have a lot of staff to kind of put that on. So it's kind of a mix. It depends on where you look in the organization. I'm not an expert on running anyone's operation,
I'm not
but
saying any particular department. I'm just saying overall, that's
Sure.
where our expenses have
Right.
gone up. So I just trying to do an overview so people get a general sense of.
I
kind
would
of
add that employees often bring new initiatives and furthering the city, which adds to contracting costs as well.
Okay.
So I also saw increases in contract costs.
Okay, that's good to know. Those are two areas to focus on. You also said in the graph that shows our deficit over time that the raises for some groups are included in that over time. So there are some bargaining units that are not included in that. So if we wanted to give everyone raises, that would be even higher?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that that was covered. Everyone keeps dancing around the closed landfill. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a summary. That is something that has been talked about for a while. Sean, do you just want to give, because that's an awful big deficit number that we've been just kind of brushing aside. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that deficit isn't something we're paying today. And it's not contributing to this deficit, but it's something that we're working on in a separate way. Correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is a deficit that's grown in that landfill account for multiple years. The city's currently negotiating with their franchise hauler, who is also co-owner of the landfill, on how we're going to address that. But we are making pretty good strides with that, and I think we'll have a solution here sometime soon.
So it's not that we're ignoring the deficit, it's that we're working through the details, and so we're not paying it until the details of that conversation have been sorted out. So that's the reason why we have that deficit.
Exactly.
As far as the ARPA funding is concerned, can we get is it possible maybe during our next meeting to get an update on how much has been spent of each of those different categories and make sure that it's gotten allocated? I know that it needs to be allocated by 2024, but we want to make sure those groups are actually moving towards something, because it needs to be reallocated by 2024 as well if they're not making progress on getting that money spent. So is it possible that we can get an update on that? I want to make sure we don't leave any on the table by not reallocating it and then have somebody not spend their funding.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we can do that for sure. It needs to be allocated by the end of calendar year 2024 and spent by the end of calendar year 2026.
But we allocated it a while ago, so if
We
they're
did.
not spending it, then we need to make sure that we're.
Right. We don't
top
want
of
to
that.
have to figure that out on December 29th.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. part of the costs of the city are our costs of energy, and we're doing an energy audit. Is there a possibility that we could see some savings that might come out of that, or where are we on that?
I think that we'll see savings long-term from that, but if we go through with the ESCO model, that's basically a no-interest loan. Excuse me, with the debt service being paid off by the energy savings itself. So depending on what we do, energy upgrades, the payback period for that, where we're actually seeing money, I don't know what that's going to look like, right? 10 years, 5 years, I'm not sure. There will be an energy savings for sure, but it's not going to be an immediate savings because we need to do the no interest loan to pay for the upgrades in the first place.
So we'll get the upgrades. They won't cost us anything because the savings on our bill will go
Exactly.
towards paying off that loan for those
Right.
additional projects.
And all that needs to come back to council, right? So we haven't we don't have a contract that we've entered into yet. Excuse me. And the actual upgrades themselves come to council for a decision on what we're going to do. Because we are going to be incurring some sort of debt in order to do that. But my discussion with council and my direction to staff has always been anything that we do needs to be budget neutral or budget positive, not budget negative, because we don't want to go into the hole more than we already are, right?
Yep.
We want to make sure that it's going to be a positive or at least neutral at best.
Okay, great. So that should be coming back to us at some point in the not so distant future.
I think we're anticipating it coming back. Is it the end of the month? The second 24th, end of July.
Okay, great. Yeah, it sounds like the last meeting of the month is getting busy. And then the last one I had is just kind of a question on the domes project. Is there timing for when we think something might actually I know we're doing the planning right now. Is there an idea? Because as far as I know, the county's still sorting out moving out of the domes and things. So I didn't know.
We actually had a meeting with their staff, with the new CEO last week to talk about this. The county is anticipating eventually moving. They have no idea when that's going to happen.
Okay.
And so there's no timeline, like within 3 years, 5 years, whatever they're planning on moving.
Okay.
Because it's a, big up thing to move. Plus they don't know what. Right.
Yeah.
So there's no actual time frame for when they're planning on moving.
Okay, great. I think that was all of my questions. Thank you very much. Is there any public comment?
Madam Mayor, I have just a quick question, and I apologize, but
No problem.
on page 323, of the budget here, it says 1103 High Street, and it says Chamber. That's really supposed to be that is where the Chamber is. The Welcome Center is there also, but that's the Western States Trail Museum. So maybe we should change that.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
No problem. Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay. Seeing none, this is informational. Am I correct in that?
Mm-hmm.
That we're just receiving this update?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So then we will just bring this back next meeting to do final approval of the budget before the end of the fiscal year. Correct? Next steps. Okay, great. All right. Okay, moving on to the city manager's report.
I'll make this as quick as possible considering what time it is. So we all know that we lost Chamber of Commerce CEO Jackie Weston, who passed away unexpectedly this past week. In tribute to her, we've placed flowers, a ribbon, and her favorite drink in the chair where she routinely sits in the meeting. So you'll see that in the back if folks are wondering about that. There's a procession tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock. She makes her way to her final resting place. That starts on Upper Lincoln Way. We'll pass by here at City Hall on our way to the cemetery, and we're asking folks to line the street for that. And then her celebration of life will be held on Saturday at ARD Park at 4 p.m. This past week, Michelle Reeves, nationally known expert in downtown revitalization and placemaking, gave her final report on the findings after spending multiple days here at both Old Town and Downtown. She also spent an hour or so with 3 of our businesses and property owners. We put her presentation and the findings on the city's website, and we're actually talking to Sacramento Area Council of Governments about having her come back again in the next couple of weeks, funded 100% by them for additional work. So
That's great.
just a little bit of work, not a whole lot, but free money is good money. Let's see, we have the Special Olympics Law Enforcement Torch Run on June 20th at 4 p.m. Staff and athletes are going to be running through downtown and Old Town. PD staff will be running through downtown and Old Town, showing our support for the Special Olympics. And then fire activities increased with the weather. Obviously, when it gets warmer, we've got that fire increasing. No vegetation fires in the city yet, but we did have a commercial vehicle fire at Echo Valley. Crews held the fire to the cargo, which was a hay, with no extension to the vehicle or the building. And APD is handling the investigation. That's all that I got. I can answer questions if you have any questions.
I just wanted to say, I did have the opportunity to attend that presentation by Michelle. It was very informative, and I think it was very well received. And one of the comments that businesses made was really having more communication with the city and with economic development. And I would very much like to see us have quarterly meetings, the city staff with DBA, with OTBA, and the businesses on Highway 49, just so we can kind of check in with each other and coordinate. And, there's an opportunity. We know that there are some CBDG monies that are there in our budget that are specifically for economic development kinds of things. We used to have a facade improvement actually, I think we still have a facade improvement program. It's just never funded. But there might be some opportunity to leverage some of those funds that can only be used. There's federal monies that are designated for economic development, and there's a few state. We can't use them for anything else. But we might be able to use those for some of our projects. It was just a fascinating presentation. It really talked about what businesses do, their windows, facades, things of that nature. And the other thing was really the utilization of color with buildings. I would like to maybe revisit, now we're so very busy, but at some point, I'd like to talk about that in context of our historical preservation. I'm incredibly supportive of historic preservation and preserving our architecture and our buildings. But paint is temporary. And which is witnessed, when you go to Europe, you see those buildings that are much older than ours. And some of them have some really nice paint, not obnoxious. I'm not talking about lime green and watermelon seeds and things of that nature, but just having a little bit different. Beige is not a color. And so that's something that we would need to run through our discussions with our historic preservation task force and things of that nature. So our design committee, not task force. We don't have a task force anymore. It's old. But just kind of putting that out there that I'm interested in that when we talk about economic development, and very much interested in having those quarterly meetings so that we can all communicate with each other and do what we can to help support our businesses. So thank you.
The facade improvement program is actually something that we've been talking about internally. I did that in Loomis and it was super successful. I looked at our program and it's way too complicated. And so looking at actually using the CDBG money for that specifically.
Yeah,
So we'll bring that back.
I think it would be, there's some opportunity there. Absolutely. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate, I'd like us just to kind of think outside the box a little bit, but those quarterly meetings will also be very helpful. So thank you very much, Sean, for having her come, and kudos for talking to James into potentially give some additional funding. She's fantastic.
Sean,
Should have been.
Sorry, there were some issues that went on at the fairgrounds with some of the events that have been going on lately. Can you give us a little update on what's going on at the fairgrounds?
Boy.
Sorry, I know that's a loaded one, but
That is a little like kind of a loaded. So I will say that I need to set up a meeting with mayor, the committee that we established at the last council meeting. I need to get that meeting set up with, mayor and council member Dell and Calvillo, and me with Don and his staff to start talking through some of those issues. Chief Canan is working with CHP to try to get that MOU figured out so that way we can enforce noise ordinances on the fairgrounds property. So that's in progress, and we're trying to work through that pretty quickly here too. There's events coming up during the summertime, obviously, that we want to make sure that we're able to respond to. So
there's
it's
been a lot of issues that have come up with the fairgrounds lately. I was wondering if it might make sense for us to write a letter of concern about what's been happening at the fairgrounds, because it hasn't just been not working with the community, but there's been safety issues and things and noise complaints that have been happening more and more frequently lately. And I just want to make sure that the concerns of the community are being documented somewhere and are being heard. I don't know if it's necessarily anything the state's going to do about it because we're Auburn and we're not probably a big priority, but I want us to start taking steps in the direction of making sure that we are moving in the direction of making comments and having our concerns documented so people know that we're not necessarily thrilled with how things are moving forward with the fairgrounds right now. Is that possible for us to do?
I can prepare something and bring it back for the next council meeting. If you'd like
Okay.
to do that, have council officially approve the letter and
I'm, noise has been an issue.
Yeah.
We've both received the complaints.
Noise has been an issue. Working with the community has been an issue. Safety has been an issue because they ask CHP to respond and CHP doesn't have the ability to respond quickly. There's been, and also
costs,
we've been asking them to let us know when they're doing events and they won't tell us, or we haven't gotten a calendar from them. So there's a variety of issues that have been growing over the last several months that I'm just concerned that if we don't start addressing, it's going to keep getting worse.
I just hope we can have that meeting soon because I'd like to be able to convey that to them. And then if we're going to send a letter, I'd like to be able to cite the fact that we did have a meeting and we conveyed that specific information to them. You know,
Maybe we can draft it and bring it with us, or draft up our list of
yeah,
concerns
or
and bring it with
something.
us.
And then, yeah, because I think that's important that we do our due diligence. If we're going to send something to the state, we can say, we know we brought these issues, had this meeting, and this is, you know.
We also had stated that we were going to have the fairgrounds come and do a presentation here and give us an update on things. And we haven't been able to do that either. So maybe we can also invite Dawn to come and do a presentation here on the fairgrounds and how things are going and all of that. I know he did a presentation at the chamber.
I'll try.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there anything else for the city manager?
Yes, I was going to mention that both Cindy Gustafson and I have communicated with Roger Nilo, our state senator, about that issue. And so his office is looking at that as to whether there needs to be a state, because it's state property.
Yeah.
So whether the state needs to take some action on moving that forward. So get us out of this situation that we're in now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Oh, Councilwoman Sierra Simmons.
Just a quick comment because I was able to attend Michelle's presentation via Zoom. And yeah, it was incredible. It was just very dynamic. And I mean, when I was driving home, I was looking at those same buildings that I thought, okay, that makes total sense. And then I've been able to speak with a few of our business owners that are, especially those along Lincoln Way in the downtown area. And they were very positive, a little, not leery, but a little cautious about the fact that we have business owners and then we have property owners. And so while everyone wants to be successful, that seems to be a concern amongst our business owners, is making sure our property owners are encouraged to, try to work with their tenants so that the suggestions that Michelle has given that I think are very valid and can be done, can be accomplished. And then the other concern that I was hearing from these owners was, and I think Alice, you touched on that, was the fact that we have this historical design review. And the questions were like, well, what's that going to do? Because we're seeing all these things, and I sat on that, and I know Sandy did and Alice did. When these questions are coming in and we're talking about paint. And so that's what they're thinking. So they'd like to see more of an explanation as to how those approaches that Michelle is suggesting, how that ties and how that will change, if any changes will occur within the Historic Design Review Committee. So just wanted to add that. And it was a great presentation, and thank you for making it available via Zoom. Thank you for requesting.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of ways to make things easier, like HOAs give approved lists of colors and things like that, so you don't have to go through that approval process. So maybe there's ways that we can incorporate some of those solutions without making the processes any longer than they already are.
Yeah, I just think that we need to do kind of a comprehensive look at zoning code stuff in general, right? During the general plan update at the tail end of that, we'll need to do some of that. But the last thing I want to have happen is somebody participated in that meeting, got all this good information, comes forward with, they want to paint their building. They say, I can't do that because it's not beige. Like, I don't want that to happen. So we need to figure out ways to make sure that we're saying yes to that kind of stuff as much as we can.
I have one last thing.
Yes.
I forgot to put it forward during the budget time. I think we should think about some sort of vacancy fee, or I don't want to say the word tax at this point in time, but we could have a fee, and that would be relatively, it doesn't have to be a very high fee, but something to remind people that, you know, you're sitting on property that's vacant, and, you know, sometimes we have to do inspections, and I think if we put it in terms of that, it might be a good idea for us to think about, because we still have to service the vacant buildings. And, you know, obviously you don't want it to where makes it impossible and people are just renting out their building just to rent it out. But if you give them, you know, a year or whatever period of time and then impose some sort of fee to remind them, I think that's something that we should think about. And I know Gary's done those before.
Do we want to ask staff to bring something back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in seeing some ideas.
I just think we have so much on the, with the budget and everything else. I'm not a fee person. But I think there can be some implications with that. I mean, sometimes there are circumstances. I agree that we have some people that have vacancies. Some of the Ethan Conrad buildings are just vacant and vacant and vacant because they charge too much or what have you. But there are some instances where people do have, well, I think, you know.
I think that, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that's the point, is that if you can bring something back, we can see that shows how, if it's successful in other cities and what wording they have. Because I can't guess, you know, I agree. If it's not going to be worded correctly, and if you're going to make it so difficult that people, you know, are suffering by it, then you certainly don't want that.
How about we have that come back within the next couple months? Because there's a lot going on over the summer, and especially with them trying to get the wording for possibly putting something on the ballot. We just don't want to load more on right now, but maybe, you know, something in the next few months that you could kind of put together
We'll
and
take a look at it.
take a look at it. Okay,
Yeah, no problem.
all right, that's all. Are we good with skipping the council updates?
Yeah.
Or, yep, okay, great. All right, with that, then we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you.
Wow.
I only like to raise fees
Very exciting.
recovery. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh.
You don't think